Every 90 seconds, someone in the UK is reported missing. In the US, almost 1,800 people are reported missing every day. Thankfully, most of these missing people are recovered and returned home, but not every case ends like this. The list of cold cases is ever growing, and there are investigators out there who are determined to get to the bottom of them. Number 5. 34-year-old Aaron Scott Johnson, also known as AJ, was known as a dedicated and loving man who worked hard to provide for his wife, Amanda, and his stepchildren. To the outside world, AJ seemed to be living the perfect life, but behind closed doors, he was battling with his mental health. AJ's friends and family rallied around him to provide him with the support that he needed, and by October of 2020, things seemed to be on the up. One night, AJ would disappear under bizarre circumstances, leaving his family reeling and desperate for answers. Not much is known about AJ's early life or background. Prior to 2020, AJ married Amanda, making her Mrs. Johnson. During the early days of their relationship, AJ made it clear that he was happy to be a part of Amanda's children's lives. As the relationship became more serious, AJ was slowly introduced to the children and took on the role of a father. At work, AJ was described as dedicated and hardworking, and his kind heart always shone through. Even with the kind heart and warm personality, AJ still struggled with his mental health. In mid-2020, Amanda noticed a change in her husband. AJ didn't visit the doctor to receive a formal diagnosis, but she told the Dryden Wire she could tell something was different with him. On October 10, 2020, AJ awoke and helped Amanda prepare the kids for school before making the short drive to Potter's Farm in Exeland. AJ worked long, tedious hours, and he appeared normal, at least on the outside. When the day was done, AJ called Amanda just as he was about to make the drive home, but the two got into an argument. Amanda would later tell investigators that the two had argued about their money and finances, something that had been plaguing them for months. It was a large source of their stress, and AJ had taken a large chunk of the burden. Following the argument, AJ told Amanda that he was going to stay the night with friends before disconnecting the call. Instead of heading home, AJ drove to his friends. Friends did confirm that AJ stayed the night with them, and by the morning, he had cleared his head and was ready to return home. At around 6 p.m., AJ asked to be dropped off at the intersection of Highway CC and Highway N in Sawyer County, Wisconsin, also known as 6 Mile Corner. According to reports, AJ asked to be dropped off here, as it was where he had parked his 2001 Dodge Dakota truck the night before. The reason for AJ leaving his truck here was because he had encountered car issues. Friends commented that while AJ's truck was still safe to drive, he opted to ride with them and collect the truck in the morning. AJ's friends drove away, watching his image fade into the rearview mirror. Unfortunately, this was one of the last times AJ was ever seen or heard from. When he failed to return home, Amanda reported him missing to the Rusk County Sheriff's Office. Following this report, a search was launched, and investigators began digging into AJ's background. Investigators discovered that at 10:15 a.m. on October 11, 2020, AJ's phone had pinged in an area 12.6 miles northwest of Ladysmith, Wisconsin. Interestingly, the Dryden Wire reports the Rusk County Sheriff's Office also tracked AJ's last ping to an area in Blue Hills, Wisconsin, around 19 miles from Ladysmith. The Rusk County Sheriff's Office then began to focus its search in this area. There are conflicting reports as to the exact date that AJ's truck was found. His family has publicly stated that the truck was discovered on December 3, 2020. Regardless of the date discrepancies, all sources agree that AJ's truck was found on a logging trail off of Blue Hills Fire Lane, where Meadow Dam Road and Perch Lake Road intersect. No clues were found within the truck, and the Rusk County team, including Amanda Johnson and AJ's friends and family, continued their search. Days after AJ's truck was discovered, the crew came across AJ's gloves, pants, a check, and some cash. The searchers also discovered that AJ had created a makeshift teepee on a ridge close to the road and his truck. This teepee was within sight of the road, and his gloves were found a mere 800 yards from it. This discovery gave investigators hope that AJ was out in the woods somewhere. As the days went on, Amanda appealed to other law enforcement agencies for help, and even asked for more volunteers to be brought into the search. It appears that this request was not followed through with. On December 14th, almost 2 weeks after investigators found AJ's abandoned truck, a witness came forward with not just a sighting, but also a photo. The witness claimed they had seen someone fitting AJ's description on October 12, 2020, walking down a logging road in Birchwood, Wisconsin, 20 miles from where his truck was discovered. The sighting stuck out as the man was seen wearing only a tank top, boxer shorts, and socks. Incredibly, the witness was able to snap a picture of the man from his car, and this was later shared with Amanda, who confirmed that it was AJ. The witness had asked the man if he needed assistance, but he claimed to be fine and walked away. This is now believed to be the final sighting of AJ. It's unknown why it took the witness over 2 months to come forward with this information, though. Amanda also made a further comment on the photo, stating that AJ didn't even walk around the house in just his underwear and his t-shirt, making this behavior completely unexplainable. One theory that was put forward by the Charlie Project is paradoxical undressing. This phenomenon is seen in cases of hypothermia, where the person becomes inexplicably hot despite the freezing temperatures around them. This then causes them to remove all of their clothing, leading to a rapid deterioration of their condition. According to the Charlie Project, temperatures in the Blue Hills area on October 11th and 12th were between 18 Celsius and 3.9 Celsius at night. AJ's remains have never been discovered, despite wide-scale searches of the area being conducted. Amanda and AJ's family hope that one day they will finally learn what happened to him. Erin Scott Johnson is described as a white female with blonde hair, blue eyes, 5'6", and 200 to 220 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Russ County Sheriff's Office at 715-532-2200, quoting case number 20C04979. To the outside world, Roy J. Frish lived an unassuming life. He had achieved a lot within his lifetime and was not shy of long hours and hard work. In the 1930s in the US was a time for rebuilding following the infamous 1929 Wall Street crash. Many Americans were trying to make money however they could, and Roy ensured that he stayed on the right side of the law. It was Roy's insistence on staying straight that landed him in the middle of a court case as a witness, but before he could testify, he would disappear. Roy Frish lived at 247 Court Street in Reno, Nevada, with his mother and sisters. He was known to be fiercely loyal to his family, and he took pride in caring for the household. Born in 1888, Roy had experienced a time of prosperity and change. He saw the value of hard work and also experienced what the fruits of his labor could bring him. When he was around 26 years old, the Great War broke out, dragging in Allied and Axis forces. Roy was just one of millions of young men who joined the U.S. Army, although we don't know whether he volunteered or was drafted into the U.S. Army following the 1917 Selective Service Act. In 1918, Roy returned home, where he worked his way up to the position of Reno City Councilman. Eventually, Roy was offered the prestigious position as head cashier at the George Wingfield Riverside Bank. This position came with good pay, good social standing, and a high level of responsibility. Thankfully for Roy's higher-ups, his level head and determination made him the perfect candidate for the job. Unlike many men of the time, Roy also abstained from tobacco, alcohol, and gambling. On March 22, 1934, Roy finished up a hard day at work before returning home. At around 7:30 p.m., he kissed his mother goodbye, telling her he was heading out to the Majestic Theater to watch the film Gallant Lady. A Nevada historian, Philip I. Earle, laid out Roy's final moments in his investigative reporting. According to Earle, Roy would have walked past the Washoe County Courthouse, where he had also previously worked, before walking over the Virginia Street Bridge and to the Majestic Theater, located on East 1st Street. By 9:30 p.m., the film finished and Roy headed home, this time taking an alternate route. On his route, Roy met a friend on the corners of Sierra and Court Streets, according to which the two exchanged small talk before parting ways. This was the last time that Roy was ever seen or heard from again. The street corner where the friend saw Roy was mere steps from his Court Street home, but he never made it. His distraught mother reported him missing to the Reno Police Department when he failed to return. At first, the Reno police believed Roy had left of his own volition, but then they discovered something terrifying. As previously mentioned, Roy worked as the head cashier at the George Wingfield Riverside Bank. In January of 1933, Roy appeared before a grand jury to testify against 4 men who were embroiled in a mail fraud scam that was taking place at the bank. What's more, just months after his disappearance, Roy was due to testify against 2 more men, James McKay and William J. Graham. According to the Nevada Magazine, this is how the mail fraud scheme worked. McKay and Graham would find an unsuspecting target and plant a purse filled with money. When the victim ultimately did the right thing and returned the purse to its owner, McKay and Graham would give the victim a tip-off about an upcoming horse race. The victim would then be told to send the pair money in what they called good faith to make the bet. The victim was specifically instructed to deposit the money via the George Wingfield Riverside Bank. The victim would then be given a winning ticket, which was fraudulent. By the time the victim returned to the George Wingfield Riverside Bank to request the transaction be reversed, the money, along with McKay and Graham, was long gone. It was at this point the victim realized they'd been scammed. Dozens of reports were made to the Reno Police Department, which prompted an investigation. They quickly discovered the key link between the cases, the George Wingfield Riverside Bank. Roy Frish was one of the first to testify, as he was the lead cashier and had undoubtedly processed many of these transactions. Unfortunately for Roy, McKay and Graham, along with the others, quickly caught wind of the names of those who were to testify against them. Once investigators uncovered Roy's key involvement in this federal case, they also made another stomach-churning discovery. McKay and Graham had strong ties to the mob. Some articles also mention George Babyface Nelson, who was known to have worked for William Graham. Babyface Nelson later told an associate on March 22, 1934, the same day Roy disappeared, that he had done a job for McKay and Graham. The FBI also became involved in Roy's case, but like the Reno Police Department, they failed to find any sign of him. A year after he disappeared, an associate of Babyface Nelson made a startling confession. He claimed to have been with Babyface Nelson that evening, and that the two waited for Roy on his walk home. The associate then claimed the pair assaulted Roy before leaving his body in an abandoned mine shaft. The associate was never able to successfully lead the FBI to Roy's body, and he also refused to testify before a grand jury. As such, Nelson and his associate were never charged in Roy's disappearance. In 1938, 4 years after Roy disappeared, William Graham and James McKay were found guilty of mail fraud and sentenced to 9 years in prison. Neither man ever made a confession and remained tight-lipped until they passed. Roy J. Frish is described as a white male with brown hair, hazel eyes, 5'8" to 5'9", and 175 to 180 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Reno Police Department at 775-334-2175, quoting case number 96162-608. 38-year-old Margaret R Dash was described by her children as a caring and loving mother. Both Margaret and her husband, Mr. Dash, worked hard to afford their family a happy and comfortable lifestyle in Clearwater, Florida. The Dashes were known in the community as honest and hardworking people who were devoted to their faith. In June of 1974, Margaret would disappear under bizarre circumstances, and in the coming 15 years, 2 more women would disappear, all sharing a bizarre commonality. June 14th of 1974 was a regular day in the Dash household at the 1100 block of Willwood Street in Clearwater. Margaret tended to the home while their children got ready for school. That morning, Margaret received a call from a relative who had taken sick and needed medicine. In line with Margaret's generous spirit, she offered to run to the pharmacy and collect their medication. Shortly after receiving that call, Margaret stepped out of the house, opting to take her daughter's white 1971 Oldsmobile Cutlass. The shop and the relative's home were just a short drive away, and she told her husband that she wouldn't be long. Hours later, Mr. Dash started to become concerned when Margaret had failed to return home. He also noted to investigators that she had failed to call him, something she would have done if she intended on staying with her relative for a few hours. Margaret was reported missing, and at first, the Clearwater Police Department treated the case as if she had left voluntarily. Margaret's husband and family pushed back, insisting that she would never leave them behind. During the initial investigation, detectives discovered that Margaret had $8,000 in her checking account, which had remained untouched. This prompted them to look deeper into her case, and they didn't like what they found. While the Dashes appeared to have shared a happy marriage, Margaret was desperately trying to hide her infidelity from the outside world. Sometime in 1974, she began an affair with Cleveland Hill Jr. Cleveland was no ordinary man, though he just so happened to be the pastor at the Lighthouse Church of Jesus Christ. This was the church that Margaret and her family attended every Sunday, sometimes even attending additional services and sermons. Cleveland was described by members of the church as an enigmatic leader who held fiery and passionate sermons within the Pentecostal church. Behind Cleveland's charming demeanor lay a man who had no qualms in controlling his family and his mistresses. Betty Jean Hamilton, who'd been married to Cleveland in the 1960s, would later testify to his violent temperament. In 1968, Cleveland arrived at Betty's parents' home after she fled their marital home. Betty had filed for divorce, which sent Cleveland into a furious rage. In retaliation, Cleveland showed up at the home and attacked Betty Jean and her mother, Josephine Hamilton. Luckily, the two survived the attack. Cleveland got away with the lesser charge of assault, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. By 1971, Cleveland was back in Clearwater and continued his religious career. Throughout his time as a pastor at the Lighthouse Church of Jesus Christ, Cleveland is believed to have been involved in as many as 7 affairs. Upon learning about Cleveland, Mr. Dash was interviewed, and he revealed that he knew of the affair and knew that Margaret was trying to leave him. According to Mr. Dash, Cleveland had threatened Margaret's life, which left her terrified. A month or so after Margaret disappeared, the white 1971 Oldsmobile Cutlass that she'd been driving was found abandoned in St. Petersburg, Florida, over 23 miles from Clearwater. The only thing police obtained from this search was that the front left hubcap of the car was missing. Margaret's case remained cold until 8 years later. On December 19, 1982, 43-year-old Retha Lee Hires disappeared from her apartment in Largo, Florida, 15 miles from Clearwater. Like Margaret, she'd been involved in an affair with Cleveland Hill, and the two had broken off their relationship shortly before her disappearance. Days after she was last seen, her husband received a letter from Cleveland in which he wrote that Retha, quote, left to be with him. In March of 1983, Retha's white 1976 Ford Elite was found abandoned at the 2900 block of Gulf to Bay Boulevard in Clearwater. On April 4, 1989, 21-year-old Danielle Johnson disappeared from her home in Largo, Florida. Danielle, who was a student at the St. Petersburg Junior College in Clearwater, had also been in a relationship with Cleveland. It appears that Danielle had also broken off a relationship with Cleveland in the days before she disappeared, leading to a confrontation at her family's home. Mac Johnson III, Danielle's younger brother, told the Tampa Bay Times that in early April of 1989, he remembers Cleveland showing up at the family home in Largo. A heated exchange between his father and Cleveland took place, with Mr. Johnson warning him to leave Danielle alone. Cleveland coldly responded, quote, well, you better enjoy your daughter because this may be the last time you see her. Cleveland Hill Jr. denied any involvement in the cases of Margaret, Retha, and Danielle, and without solid evidence, the Clearwater and Largo police were unable to bring about charges. In 1993, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office received a major tip in the 3 cases. This tip claimed that the remains of the 3 women could be found on a property owned by Cleveland, located at 1201 Gooden Crossing in Largo, Florida. A search was conducted on the back of this tip, but no evidence or remains were ever uncovered. In 1992, Cleveland Hill Jr. received 19 years in a federal prison for unrelated crimes. He was released in 2008 and moved back into the area where the 3 women had disappeared. In July of 2022, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office conducted another excavation on the property previously owned by Cleveland, but again, this search turned up nothing. Cleveland passed away at the age of 70 in 2018. Investigators had named him a suspect in the case of Retha Hires, and he was considered to be connected to Margaret's and Danielle's disappearances. He was never convicted in any of these cases, and maintains his innocence until the end. Margaret R Dash is described as an African-American female with black hair, brown eyes, 5'5" to 5'8", and 142 to 155 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Lieutenant Michael Hasty of the Clearwater Police Department at tips@myclearwater.com or at 727-562-4242, quoting case number 749084. 23-year-old Marshelle Shelley Hansen was described as a shy and quiet young woman who was just beginning to find her place in the world. Shelley had decided to stride out on her own, leaving her family behind in another city. This newfound independence helped her come out of her shell and gain new experiences and opportunities. In 1987, Shelley received some good news that was about to change the course of her life. But before Shelley could see that change, she mysteriously disappeared. By 1987, Shelley was determined to make her own way in the world. She had moved from her home in Ransom Lake, Wisconsin, to Phillips, Wisconsin, over 246 miles away. Shelley's mother and brother stayed behind in Ransom Lake, knowing that Shelley was more than capable of taking care of herself. To support herself, Shelley worked 2 jobs, one at Marquip Inc., a manufacturing company, and another at an IGA supermarket. On November 12, 1987, Shelley arrived at Marquip Inc. for her late shift. Marquip manufactured corrugated cardboard and distributed it around Wisconsin and the rest of the U.S. By 8 p.m., Shelley's feet and back were sore and she was glad it was time to clock out. Her colleagues commented that she'd been in a good mood that day, and shortly after finishing time, she got into her car and left. It wasn't until 5 days later, on November 17, 1987, that anybody knew that anything was wrong. At around 11 a.m. that morning, the Price County Sheriff's Office responded to a call from the IGA supermarket. One of their employees, Marshelle Hansen, had failed to show up for her shift and she wasn't answering her phone. Managers at the supermarket became concerned and called the police to report her missing. Shelley's family in Ransom Lake were also contacted, and they immediately made the several-hour drive to aid in the search for her. Shortly after Shelley was reported missing, her car was found abandoned in the parking lot of Lake 10 Resort, a guest house for campers with a bar. Bartenders at the Lake 10 Resort recognized Shelley but didn't report seeing her on the day of her disappearance. When Shelley's family arrived in Phillips, they divulged an important piece of information. At the start of November, her brother Robert and her mother received a call from Shelley, in which she sounded extraordinarily happy. She announced to the pair that she was 2 to 3 months pregnant and was over the moon at the prospect of becoming a mother. During the call, Shelley and her mother discussed baby names, which Shelley had already picked out and made a plan to get her what she needed. Shelley openly discussed her plans for motherhood, apart from one key aspect. Robert later told WSAW that his sister refused to tell them the identity of the father, no matter how hard he pressed. Shelley remained steadfast in keeping her silence. She promised her mother that the father of the child would financially support the baby, but only under the condition that she kept his name a secret. This aspect bothered Robert, but there was nothing he could do. Before he knew it, he was arriving in Phillips to search for his missing sister. Colleagues at Marquip also revealed another interesting clue to investigators. By November 12th, everyone at the plant knew Shelley was expecting, and congratulations had already been said. That morning, Shelley arrived at work with a piece of paper in her hand. She was enamored by it, and it wasn't until later that her colleagues realized it wasn't a piece of paper, but an ultrasound scan. When Shelley was a child growing up in Ransom Lake, she suffered from a congenital condition which caused a deformity in her foot. She'd worn a foot brace to correct her condition, and it appears that she may have been concerned that she'd passed the condition on to her child. This ultrasound fits into the usual timeline, with the first scan being conducted between 8 and 14 weeks, and the second between 18 and 21 weeks. It remains unclear whether investigators were able to track down the father of Shelley's child. After Shelley disappeared, the Price County Sheriff's Office confirmed there was no sign of a struggle in her apartment or her car, and her personal belongings were turned over to her brother, Ron Hansen, who lived close by in Park Falls, Wisconsin. Days after Shelley disappeared, a fire ravaged Ron's home in Park Falls. Everything that had been collected from Shelley's apartment had been destroyed by the fire, potentially destroying vital evidence. The ultrasound that Shelley had on November 12th was also never recovered. Forensic fire investigators determined a wood-burning stove had caused the fire, with arson being officially ruled out. November 12th marked a dark day in Phillips' history. A year prior to Shelley's disappearance, the city had been rocked by another disappearance. In 1986, Carla Lenz disappeared under similar and bizarre circumstances. It wasn't until 1988 that the truth, at least in Carla's case, would be revealed. That year, her body was found just 4 miles from where Shelley lived. In a bizarre twist, it will be Carla's own brother-in-law, John R. Weber, who was convicted of the crime. John Weber was found guilty of not only this crime, but also the assault and kidnapping of his own wife, Emily Weber. In total, John was sentenced to 164 years in prison for both offenses, which resulted in 18 charges being brought against him. In the 1990s, John appealed his convictions, but the charges were upheld. John is considered a person of interest in Shelley's disappearance and has been interviewed several times over the years. In each interview, John maintained his innocence, and no evidence has ever been uncovered linking him to Shelley's disappearance. Marshelle Shelley Hansen is described as a white female with brown hair, unknown eye color, 5 foot to 5'10" and 180 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Price County Sheriff's Office at sheriff@co.price.wi.us or 715-339-3011, quoting case number 1987-1148. 37-year-old Lisa Steck was well known and liked within her community of Plainfield, Illinois. Those who knew Lisa described her as a kind and caring woman with a bright spirit and a giving heart. By 2007, Lisa, her 2 children, and her estranged husband, Mr. Steck, lived together in the 13200 block of Red Star Drive. Whilst Lisa and her husband were no longer together, the two were trying to make it work for their children. Hours after Lisa contacted her attorney, she would disappear. In 1993, Lisa became Mrs. Steck in a ceremony surrounded by her friends and family. She was overjoyed to start a new chapter in her life with the man that she loved. Prior to getting married, Lisa had attended Southern Illinois University before transferring to Kendall College. It was at Kendall College that Lisa would graduate with a degree in hotel and restaurant management, and she was determined to put her degree to good use. After obtaining her degree, Lisa began working at Lincoln Elementary School as a food assistant. She enjoyed her work, not just for the food management side, but for the daily interactions she would get to have with students. While Lisa's career was a source of happiness for her, her marriage was not. By 2007, after 14 years of marriage, Lisa and Mr. Steck's marriage was on the rocks. In early 2007, Mr. Steck filed for divorce, with Lisa agreeing with his decision. While the two were soon to no longer be legally joined, they decided to remain living together at Red Star Drive for the sake of their children, who were not yet in their teenage years. Lisa confided in her friends that she was excited to see what her life was going to be like without her husband. According to reports, there had been several stressors in the Steck's marriage, the biggest of which was money. Mr. Steck had recently lost his job, and there was an issue with their home being mortgaged for more than what it was worth. But it appears there may have been another stressor. Lisa's friends told investigators that she was scared of Mr. Steck and had been attending counseling sessions. In 2006, a year before Lisa disappeared, the Plainfield Police Department were called to the Red Star Drive home on reports of a domestic disturbance. Reports indicate that the altercation between Lisa and Mr. Steck had been purely verbal, with no violence taking place. Neither Lisa nor Mr. Steck were charged with anything, and the incident was quickly put behind them. The last confirmed sighting of Lisa was made on April 30th, 2007 by her husband. He would later tell investigators he saw his estranged wife at around 6 p.m. that evening when she left the home. He explained that Lisa's evening routine comprised of her visiting the gym at Plainfield North High School. When investigators noticed Lisa's car in the garage, Mr. Steck commented that he believed that Lisa had gotten a ride there. The Plainfield police would quickly discover that Lisa had never shown up to her planned workout class the night before. While Lisa and Mr. Steck lived in the same house, she told friends that the two barely spoke and rarely ever saw each other outside of caring for their children. Lisa's disappearance would not be reported until the following day, May 1st, 2007, when the Plainfield Police Department confirmed that it was not Mr. Steck, but a concerned neighbor who reported Lisa missing. A search of the home didn't show any signs of a struggle or altercation, and the only things missing, aside from Lisa herself, were her phone and handbag. Investigators immediately set about searching for Lisa and dove into her records. After she left her home on April 30th, there had been no activity on her phone or bank cards, and her car had been left behind. As investigators began to dig into Lisa's disappearance, they stumbled across a troubling clue. On the morning of April 30th, 2007, Lisa mailed a petition to her attorney. This petition asked that Mr. Steck be removed by order from the Red Star Drive home. In this document, Lisa specifically referred to her estranged husband as, quote, unnecessarily relentless, cruel, inconsiderate, domineering, and verbally abusive. She also noted his behavior was detrimental to their children. In the early days of the investigation, Mr. Steck agreed to cooperate with the investigation, allowing his computer and devices to be forensically searched. However, just days later, his attitude changed. On May 8, 2007, Mr. Steck was taken to a local police station and asked by the Plainfield Police to submit to a lie detector test. The moment a lie detector test was mentioned, Mr. Steck's demeanor changed and he point-blank refused to take it. From here on out, Mr. Steck refused to cooperate with the case at all, ignoring all calls from the Plainfield Police Department. During the investigation, Lisa's and Mr. Steck's cars were seized and forensically examined. Some news outlets reported that a tarp covered in red stains was found, but according to the Charley Project, this discovery has never been validated by the Plainfield Police Department. In November of 2007, a grand jury assembled to further investigate Lisa's bizarre disappearance, at which her 2 children were called to testify. Some reports indicate that on the day Lisa disappeared, Mr. Steck gave the 2 money to go to Walgreens to buy sweets. As of 2024, no charges relating to his estranged wife's disappearance have ever been filed against Mr. Steck, and he remains a possible person of interest. If still alive today, Lisa would be 54 years old. Lisa Steck is described as a white female with brown hair, brown eyes, 5 foot to 5'2", and 120 to 125 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Chicago FBI office at 312-421-6700 or the Plainfield Police Department at 815-439-7653, quoting case number 074116. Allan Wake refers to an action-adventure video game that was developed by a Finnish company that was also behind the development of the Max Payne games, Remedy Entertainment. There are various aspects to this intriguing game that follows the journey of a best-selling crime fiction author who suffered a 2-year writer's block. He then had a dream where he accidentally knocked a hitchhiker down who disappeared shortly after. The car was wrecked and Allan managed to get to a lighthouse nearby, but is suddenly attacked by the same hitchhiker. The rest of the dream had been strange and detailed, and soon he would awake alongside his wife, Alice. The 2 arrive in Bright Falls to help recover the writer's creative flow. Some of the townsfolk that they met are said to have been escapees from a nearby mental institution for artists called the Cauldron Lake Lodge. The couple then make their way to a cabin, where Allan storms out only moments later. When he returns, he found that Alice had fallen into the lake, and he dove in to save her, but he quickly awoke back in his car, with a wound to his head after a car accident. He begins to make his way through a wooded area, where he comes across pages of a manuscript that seem to point at a book that he wanted to write but never could. The following pages detail the experience similar to that of his dream. The player has the duty of trying to uncover the mystery behind Alice's disappearance, while simultaneously experiencing some events relating to his latest novel, of which he doesn't recall writing. The enemies had included the Taken, who are people that were turned into shadow puppets for the dark presence to use. Other enemies include taken birds and poltergeists. The ending of the game is where the real mystery lies. Allan enters into a creepy dark room where he's met by a character whom he'd met at the start of the game, a veiled woman who's now being controlled by the dark presence. Here, he's told that he'll never get Alice back, and as the darkness concludes their sentence, Allan steps forward and is able to defeat the embodiment, which explodes into light. Allan is then seen at a typewriter writing a part of his book. The clock begins to reverse, and he can be heard saying that there's a long journey back into the night. Thereafter, he enters the cabin where Alice's screams can be heard. He calls out for her and approaches the lake, only to see that she's fallen in. He jumps in after her, and the scene switches to imagery of a mountain formation where the dock had been situated. Alice can then be seen swimming toward the viewer and is able to surface again. Once she's caught her breath, she began to call out for Allan, who's nowhere to be seen. The next scene reveals a celebration before switching back to the writer typing away and uttering the words, "It's not a lake, it's an ocean." And that was the rather obscure ending of the game, whose sequel has only recently been released. As with many other games, Allan Wake also has a subreddit for it. One user asked what others' interpretation of the ending had been. One commenter explained that the last words that the writer spoke were a rewording of a poem that another character gave him at the start. He also theorized that Cauldron Lake may be a magical lake with strange powers, and that some sort of entity may be living inside, but suggests that the lake is actually a port connected to an ocean or an entire universe. The dark place, he believes, is a whole plane of existence, and there's a threshold that leads to it within Cauldron Lake. This individual believes that there may be other thresholds as well. It's also learned that the dark presence is not the only entity to inhabit the dark place. Another player suggested that Allan Wake dove into the lake in order to exchange his life for Alice's freedom, hence the phrase he uttered earlier regarding turning back time. A different theory suggests that the end phrase may be in reference to the events in Allan Wake being small, like in a lake in comparison to the ocean, which is the Remedy-connected universe. The exact meaning behind the ending of this game has been a matter of debate in various theories. Some agree with the theories that others have created, but others don't, and the end phrase has been left up to various interpretations. The ending of this game is certainly mysterious and strange. Perhaps the phrase is a reference to how much deeper the game's theme and the dark place may actually go, as suggested by another. The ending may find its solution in the sequel that's since been released. The following mystery reveals some spoilers for the game The Evil Within, which is also known as Psycho Break. This game is a survival-based horror game that was developed by Tango Gameworks. It was directed by Shinji Mikami, who also created Resident Evil. A brief plot of the game reveals that Detective Sebastian Castellano and his two partners, Joseph Oda and Julie Kidman, make their way to a crime scene at Beacon Memorial Hospital. A massacre was seen to have taken place here, and it's now been deserted. After having found a sole survivor, the detective watches CCTV footage showing KCPD officers opening fire on an unseen force. It was after this that the officers had their lives taken by a disfigured supernatural being that now appears behind the detective. He then awakens in a basement of the hospital, where he's made to flee from a man wielding a chainsaw. The player has to navigate through the game's world with some rather limited resources. The player is required to use their wits to survive, as well as manage the very few resources they have while encountering terrors and dangers throughout the game. Additionally, the players also need to get through traps and mechanisms, of which they can also use to their advantage. The environment is said to change at random based on decisions and actions that the player makes. The most common enemies in the game are the Haunted and Alter Ego. The final boss in the game is Amalgam. Amalgam is a creature that's a combination of Ruvik and Amalgam Alpha. It stands at 100 feet tall and has some deformed limbs with a glass dome for its brain. At the end of the game, the player must navigate through a long hallway to meet the final boss. Once there, the player will be sucked into a new environment where a cutscene follows. The scene shows one of the other characters, Leslie, approaching a creature while the others try to stop him. His life is subsequently taken by the creature, and it's then revealed to be in control of Amalgam and sits within the glass dome. After a lengthy and active battle, the boss is destroyed and the player is taken to the next environment. Another cutscene where they wake up in a tub submerged in water. Once the detective gains consciousness, he managed to get himself out of the tub, where he makes his way to another room where a brain is encased in a glass ball. The character then takes it and smashes it on the ground before entirely destroying the organ. Right after this, the player will reawaken to someone saying, "Vitals, sir," and the visual of a female detective is in view. The woman comes forward and makes a shushing motion at the player, and states that the three characters should be left alone and that they're not going anywhere. Again, the player awakes in a tub, and this time it's revealed that there are other characters also in tubs, situated in a circular system connected to machines, most of which are no longer alive. On one of these tubs is the name Withers. Leslie has been placed inside, and there appears to be what looks like a trash bag, further adding to the mystery. An elevator then brings the player to the potential exit of the hospital, but as he approaches, the doors swing open, revealing armed forces who begin to storm in. The game ends with the detective exiting the building and seeing another character at the gates of the hospital, who he begins to run after but is interrupted by a strange noise in his head, and when he overcomes it, the character has disappeared. While it's not directly revealed, it's implied that Ruvik had taken over the body of Leslie in the real world. Several speculations have been made regarding the ending. One player explained that they thought that Ruvik had manifested in Sebastian's head and that Leslie was no longer alive. He hints at the clue where the camera zooms in on the deceased individual on the floor, whose face is not shown. They support this theory by asking why Leslie would be walking outside and seemingly be ignored by everyone, and the first person that the armed forces had seen was Sebastian, not Leslie. Another player suggests that both the detective and Ruvik are similar and explains that Sebastian would have had a psychic link to Ruvik or Leslie, which would be the cause of the headache as seen at the end. Another theory by this person suggests that there is no Ruvik or Leslie, and that Ruvik had realized how strong the detective was and wanted to transfer his knowledge to him, with the idea that he may have the willpower to take down the organization. But this one, he concluded, had been a long shot. The truth about the ending of the game and what it means exactly is left up to debate, and it's uncertain if it'll ever be revealed. Sometimes, though, games, books, or movies are better left with a cliffhanger to further intrigue the viewer, even if no conclusion ever comes of it. A spoiler alert is needed for the following mystery of a PlayStation 2 game called Legacy of Kain: Defiance. This game is said to be the final installment of the Legacy of Kain series. It was initially released on PlayStation 2 in 2003, before being ported to Microsoft Windows as well as Xbox. The game had received some high reviews upon its release, since it answered many questions that had been left over throughout the rest of the series. But it has been criticized for the repetitive gameplay and apparent awkward control system. Defiance is said to start off from the cliffhanger in Soul Reaver 2, and is set in the consequential fourth timeline, after Raziel was executed to be revived by the Elder God throughout the events of Soul Reaver. Kain is said to have traveled backward through time, and was then followed by Raziel into Nosgoth's past, where the conspiratorial events are uncovered, leading to the land being doomed to corruption. Raziel has established free will after he refused to take the life of Kain, and thereafter discovered that Mobius, the time streamer, had manipulated Kain into sparking a war against vampires until he'd been the last of his kind. By manipulating Raziel, Kain had hoped to find a way to undo what he had done and restore the place to its former glory. Both of the characters are playable in this game, which many gamers enjoyed since the two had worked together. The storyline of the game was described as top-notch. Each character here has his own chapter that moves the story forward. Kain is in the past looking for Raziel, who's somewhere in the future. The series writer, Amy Hennig, had added layers to the mythology of the game that had also wrapped up some cliffhangers and loose ends from the previous games. Defiance is a mix of alternate futures, time travel, and paradoxes, and certainly made for an absorbing game. But one thing that makes the game stand out is its ending, and Defiance is said to have had a fairly decent one. What this ending lacked was the feeling of finality. While some loose ends had been wrapped up throughout the course of the game, a final conflict was believed to be on its way. Nothing had come of the ending though, and even 10 years later, the conclusion was not explained. At the end of Defiance, Kain had been given the power to defeat the Elder God, and warns him that he cannot be defeated and will soon return. The entity became buried beneath the rubble of the Reaver Forge that was amid collapse. The story concludes as Kain is looking out over the pillars of Nosgoth, of which his past self had corrupted. He then thanks Raziel for the hope he had given him for the future, and this is where the game ends. This popular game series even made it to Reddit under the name r/Legacy of Kain. A deleted account posted a questionnaire asking what had actually happened at the end of Defiance. He runs through what he had understood, which had been the following, saying, quote, Raziel was sacrificed and Cain was cleansed, meaning that the pillars were cleansed as well, and the Halden Lord was also the Seraphim Lord or Dark Entity. But what the Redditor had not understood was if the Elder God was always the god of vampires, and even asked the question if Defiance had been a mere epilogue, which to some it certainly seemed as such based on the unclear ending. One commenter named Almost Sherlock explained that there was allegedly supposed to be another game after Defiance that would have presumably led Cain to healing Nosgoth. Another individual revealed that cuts and loose ends that were intended to have been resolved in the final game had not been finished in time for the release. Without another sequel to the game, players are left wondering what may happen to Nosgoth, and if there had ever been any intention by the makers to conclude the game with a satisfactory ending, where everything turns out perfectly fine. While the fate of Nosgoth remains one mystery, there is another. The last words that the Elder God spoke led many players to believe that there would be a sequel, where he returned and would have to be defeated once more. A numbers station refers to a shortwave radio station that's characterized by broadcasts of formatted numbers and sometimes letters. They're thought to address intelligence officers who are operating in foreign countries. Most of the stations that have been identified make use of speech synthesis in order to vocalize numbers. Digital modes like phase shift keying, frequency keying, and Morse code transmissions are not as common. These stations have set time, schedules, or patterns, but sometimes appear not to follow these rules. There are two types of radio listeners in the world. Most listeners focus on FM and AM stations of their choice, or would choose a station that broadcasts on the internet. The rest of the radio listeners are dedicated to high frequency, then very high frequency, and then ultra high frequency, including police scanner talk and satellite signals. Listeners of these stations encounter a world of international channels that broadcast from places such as China, Iran, Cuba, and Romania. The frequencies may also include amateur radio, marine, and air traffic. Those who take the time to listen to the offbeat signals on these stations may come across a strange broadcast that repeats a number of groups in digitally synthesized voices. These stations are believed to have existed since the First World War. As time went on, they attracted the interest of video game designers, journalists, and filmmakers. Despite the attention, though, there are very few explanations of what these signals may actually be. They're described as being creepy and certainly mysterious. Some have theorized that these stations may be signals from alien life forms, mind control devices, or relics of the Cold War, while others simply state that the stations are part of the work of the intelligence agencies or militaries that are still on the air. The signals that occupy the radio frequency are found to be between 3 and 30 megahertz and have the ability to skip off of the Earth's ionosphere, which allows them to travel vast distances. The shortwave signals have since attracted a community of international shortwave enthusiasts who listen to and communicate with shortwave stations across the world. Among the ecosystem made up of amateur broadcasters, news services, and emergency communications, every now and again, operators will come across something eerie and bizarre. One such example is that of the frequency 4625 kHz, that's known to radio amateurs as UVB-76, or the buzzer. The buzzer was discovered in 1985 and is characterized by nothing more than a monotonous buzz, and is made of two distinct tones that repeat 25 times a minute. Every couple of weeks, the buzzing will randomly be interrupted by a voice reading out a string of numbers or words in Russian. Thereafter, the buzzing continues for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The source of the buzzer was tracked down to two sites that are found to be outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg, but there's no agency, company, or organization that's ever admitted to operating the station. This led to speculation regarding the function of the buzzer. Some believed that it was used to probe for radio interference in the ionosphere, or thought that it may be part of a Russian system relating to an automatic launch of a nuclear arsenal, should there be an attack. A more likely explanation is that it belongs to a breed of radio stations whose origins may lie in the world of Cold War espionage that continues to serve the world's intelligence service. The nature of these strange number stations has attracted some devoted attention who actively seek, classify, and study the broadcasts. The amount of recorded stations grew so large that in 1993, a group that was known as Enigma 2000 created a designation system in order to keep track of them all. This station is said to classify stations using a letter prefix that indicates the type of broadcast, and a number referring to its order of discovery. The letter E, for example, indicates English, G for German, S for Slavic, and M for Morse code. With so many of these stations coming to light over the years, it's hard to say what each of them is being used for, but it certainly is an eerie discovery to have been made, and brings about new mysteries altogether. 12 years ago, a Reddit user named Blue Title posted to a subreddit called No Sleep, detailing an alleged real experience of which he captioned the Smiling Man. In this story, the poster explains that 5 years prior to the post, he'd been living in a major United States city. He'd always been a night person, so once his roommate had gone to sleep, he would often venture out for long walks. He'd spent the last 4 years going out at night alone and had never felt afraid. But this changed one evening in merely a few minutes. On an early Wednesday morning between the hours of 1 and 2, they'd been walking near a police-patrolled park that had been quite a distance from his apartment. There had been very little traffic and hardly any other passers-by, and the park was empty. The poster decided that he'd turn down a short street to loop back to his apartment, and that's when he noticed the silhouette of a man who appeared to be dancing. It was described as something similar to a waltz, but would finish each box with a forward stride. The dancing man was heading straight for him. Initially, Blue Title believed that the man had been intoxicated, so he stepped to the side to allow the individual enough space to get by. But the closer the figure got, the more graceful he appeared. He's described as tall and lanky and had been wearing an old suit. As he neared, the Redditor noticed that his eyes were wide open and wild. His head was tilted back and looking off at the sky above, and his mouth had formed a terrifying cartoonish smile. The user momentarily took his eyes off of the smiling man and crossed the street. When he glanced back over, he froze in his tracks. The strange man had stopped dancing and had now been standing with one foot in the road, standing parallel to the user. His face was still looking towards the sky, and his smile was still wide. This had unnerved him, and he began to walk again, but had kept glancing over at the strange man who didn't move. Once there was half a block between the two, Blue Title once again turned away from the figure, only to find him gone when he turned back. He initially felt a burst of relief, but that was short-lived. The person then appeared to have crossed the street and was now in a crouching position. It was believed that the man was facing him at this point. He also notes that he had turned away for only 10 seconds, revealing that the individual was able to move rather quickly. Soon, the man would start to head towards the Redditor, this time making exaggerated tiptoe movements, as though he was a cartoon character who was attempting to sneak up on someone. Instead of doing anything in reaction to this, Blue Title stood in place, frozen with fear. The figure was said to have turned away at some point after the user demanded to know what he wanted, but this too only lasted a short time. He then turned back and started running toward the poster, who then began to run as well. As he ran, he kept looking behind him, and at some point, the smiling man vanished, but that didn't stop the man from running as fast as he could back to his apartment. 6 months after this ordeal, the poster had lived in the city and never once went out on a walk again. He was entirely unnerved by this event. The comments that followed after this story had been posted ranged from slightly creeped out individuals to absolutely terrified ones. Just the mere mention of the smiling man is enough to unnerve someone. After some questions by the other users, it was determined that the large city that the poster was referring to had been Seattle, Washington. There had been more sightings related to the smiling man, and Blue Title was asked if he thought that some of them were fakes and if he was getting annoyed by them. He stated that he wasn't annoyed by them at all, and further expressed that he was not one who believed in the supernatural, and thought that the man must have just been an insane individual. Another user asked if he could give a detailed description of what the figure looked like, and he was described as being Caucasian, middle-aged with dark hair. He was possibly as tall as 6'5". 3 months ago, one commenter had asked if there had been any updates, even though the story had been posted 11 years ago. Another user supported the story by stating that they too had a similar experience a few years prior in New Orleans. There have since been various short films made that were based on this story, as well as some other sightings. The true identity as to who or what the smiling man might be remains a mystery. 7 years ago, a mysterious post was made on a subreddit. The poster, whose account has since been deleted, explained that they had a mouse problem in their home, which led them to a mysterious locked safe within a closet. The Redditor had also been asking for tips on how to open it, and stated that the safe appeared to be fixed in the closet. A few images have been supplied by them as well, showing a red-colored safe with a serial number. Sometime later, the poster edited the post and added that they'd tried to open it themselves but were unsuccessful in doing so. They had even contacted the company before getting a hold of a locksmith. After this update, the poster never returned to tell the followers if the safe was ever opened, or what it had contained. Soon, comments began to flood in. Some stated that it had been a week since the update and still nothing. Users continuously asked for an update but to no avail. One Redditor had even ventured onto the account only to find that this individual had many mysteries in their life, and so it was speculated to be a troll or a prank. Sailingham, a Redditor, commented and said, quote, "Can I propose this investigation be reopened to determine the whereabouts of OP?" The user was in fact MIA after his post had been made. Unfortunately, no one ever came to find any information regarding the user or what the safe had held. This was not the only time a mysterious safe case appeared on Reddit though. In another Reddit post, user ShinyStars55 had posted to a subreddit called What's in This Thing about a safe that they discovered in the floor during some renovations. The commenters immediately told them that they had to return to give them an update should they manage to get the safe open. After some time, ShinyStars55 returned with an image only to show that nothing was found within the safe. In another subreddit, Safe Cracking, user VivalaStool2634 had posted about a safe that belonged to their mother that didn't have a combination. After various suggestions by other users, the poster thanked them but never returned to inform them if they'd ever opened it or what was inside. Another user recently made a post about a safe that he had discovered in his new house. He detailed here that he had phoned the previous owner, who didn't know how to open the safe as well, and then contacted a locksmith where he'd been given an $850 estimate. On the 24th of February of last year, he was still at it. A few days later, it still wasn't open, and 3 days after, an update was made stating that it had been opened, and he posted a link to an image of the loot, but this link didn't work. The poster never got back to the viewers regarding what was inside, and they were all left with the mystery once again. When a commenter asked in the comments what the poster found, they simply responded with, "I haven't gotten it open." The outcome disappointed many, and it's uncertain as to whether or not he did actually manage to get it open. Another post was made in the What's This Thing subreddit by user SafeInFloor. They detailed that their neighbor had begun to speak of the previous residents in his house and told the new resident that the man who lived there was nice and seemed normal, but that one day the police showed up and arrested him. It was alleged that he had been a bank robber, and the individual was told to start looking around for a safe. It was later that same day that the poster found a safe beneath the floor. They went on to detail various aspects of their journey in opening this safe, and by the 4th update the safe was open, but inside there had only been a rubber band and some dust. The strangest part about this collection of various incidents of safes being found in houses is that there are so many of them that are buried in the floor and are only revealed by renovations. Furthermore, some of these may be a hoax and no one is certain about which those may be. There are also some cases that are really mysterious, such as the Redditor who seemed to have vanished and later had his account deleted. It was never revealed what that safe contained. Some cases such as these have been featured on RBI, or the Reddit Bureau of Investigation, but the original posts can't be found despite numerous attempts by users, further adding to the mystery. A strange and mysterious experiment was hosted on Reddit at the start of April in 2015. It remained active until the 5th of June of that same year. The experiment was a metagame called The Button, featuring an online button and a countdown of 60 seconds. The timer would reset every time the button was pressed. The button would soon attract clicks from over 1 million accounts worldwide. There have additionally been websites, extensions, and applications created to track the live statistics of the experiment. During the process of it, the button had several technical issues that allowed it to reach 0, but it was reset when people had still been clicking it. It had been on the 5th of June when no one had clicked the button and it officially reached 0. But nothing happened thereafter, and the experiment concluded right there. It had last been pressed by Big Goran, and after another 60 seconds it was deactivated, and text read, quote, "The experiment is over." The button creator was Josh Worrell, who was known as Power Language. 6 minutes after the button had ceased, he released an announcement stating that the forum would be archived in the next 10 minutes. There had been a total of 1,008,316 clicks on the button that had been logged. It's believed that this experiment was likely intended as an April Fool's prank that turned into a social experiment. It was also found that should one press the button, they were awarded a colored badge for their account, which corresponded with how much time had been left before they pressed the button. This experiment also led to some formations of groups. The subreddit divided the users into tribes that were based on their views of such an experiment. One tribe was called the Grey Hopeful, who thought they would receive a prize if they watched the button expire. The second was a group of people who didn't want to press the button, called the Followers of the Shade, who thought it was sinful to press it. The last had been the Knight of the Button, who took charge of ensuring that the button never reached 0, and that someone was always clicking it. Each Redditor was only allowed to press the button once, and so the timer would have inevitably run out. With only one press per person, Reddit would eventually run out of users, especially if there had been such a divide between pressers and non-pressers. The Reddit community is made up of millions of people, and it's quite conceivable that they would have figured out a way to keep the button alive for years to come. The Knights of the Button had even created an automated program that had relied upon donated accounts. But this, however, had failed when a bot had tried to make use of an account that had already pressed the button. After the experiment concluded, various subreddits of the tribes remained in operation. Redditors still communicate via these subreddits with one another where they reminisce of the time during the operation of the button. While the time reached 0 and the experiment was over, questions still remained. What was the experiment about and what was the outcome? This is the mystery that surrounds this strange internet enigma that seemingly makes no sense. Users have still been left with no answers from the man who created the experiment, and its cause is left up to debate. There had been some debate between the Greys and the Knights. The Greys were uncertain as to why the Knights would not just wait patiently for the button to end in order to see what happened. It's speculated that perhaps some members of the Knights believed that something bad would happen if they didn't press the button, and perhaps it did, but this is something we can't really know for certain. In both online and offline mobile games, there are properties referred to as Easter eggs. Easter eggs are hidden items or objects within a game that are revealed by venturing off the main quest or discovering a hidden area. Such properties may include items, music tracks, or visual oddities. Grand Theft Auto V is no different. In this game, there exist various Easter eggs and mysterious properties. One such mystery is that of Mount Chiliad, which is filled with hidden symbols and other mysteries. Despite some of the clues having been solved, some players are still searching for the deeper meaning behind some of these symbols. Mount Chiliad refers to a location in the GTA 5 game that most players will be familiar with. It's said to be the highest point on the map, overlooking the view of Los Santos. Gamers make use of this mountain to push the game's sandbox limits with events such as racing, but it's thought that it may harbor something more sinister beneath. Away from the rather explosive storyline, the game also possesses some engaging mysteries throughout Los Santos and San Andreas. The hidden features aid in the creation of a sense of exploration and storytelling, but players are still uncertain as to whether or not all the little mysteries have been found. The GTA community has banded together in an effort to uncover the mysteries of Mount Chiliad. Near its peak, strange scrawlings seem to appear depicting the mountain with several symbols that include a UFO, a jetpack, and an alien-esque egg. Only one of these symbols has since been solved, and that was the UFO. If the player visits the mountain at night after attaining 100% completion, the alien spacecraft will appear there, but the mysteries run far deeper than that. Additionally, if overlaid on the map from north to south, a player will find that the UFO symbol overlays exactly where the sunken UFO wreckage can be found. The symbol of the jetpack has also driven a lot of interest, as players have not found there to be any jetpack in GTA 5. But the jetpack had been a vehicle in San Andreas back in 2004, which only sparked expectations that it would be showing up in GTA 5. A jetpack-like object had made an appearance in GTA Online, but the symbolism on Mount Chiliad suggests that the single-player game had a jetpack waiting to be discovered. It's the alien egg depiction that seems to draw the most attraction though, and harbors the most mystery. There's been no evidence in the game as to the existence of an egg. It did make an appearance later on in GTA Online that seemed to be more like a nod at the Chiliad mystery, rather than the Rockstar company just giving the fans a payoff. It's been theorized that the egg may be a reference to the Epsilon cult's belief that states that the world had hatched out an egg. The Epsilon cult is a fictitious cult in GTA 5 that's also featured in San Andreas and is based on the Church of Scientology. It so far still remains a mystery as to whether or not the symbols refer to structures within the mountain itself, or if they're pointing toward places on the map, but gamers are working at uncovering their meanings. A decade has passed since this game was released, and some have lost hope in the hidden mysteries behind the Chiliad symbols, but others are dead set on getting this mystery solved. One of the strangest cryptid lores to exist is that of the Loveland frog, sometimes referred to as the Loveland lizard. This creature is said to be a bipedal that vaguely resembles a reptilian animal. They've been encountered on various occasions around Loveland, Ohio, between 1955 and 1972, as well as some more recent sightings. The cryptid is described as being gray in color with a frog-like head. It had bulging eyes and reptilian or amphibian-type skin, and stood at a height between 3 and 4 feet. The Loveland frog has been occasionally revisited in mysterious animal literature and tales that went into publication. In one telling, an illustration was included after having been produced by Ron Schaefer, based upon an eyewitness pencil drawing. Sources that do discuss this creature often recount the observation that was made by Officer Ray Shockey, or Ray Shock, who had seen a creature crossing the street at 1 in the morning on the 3rd of March in 1972, when the road had been icy. The creature was said to have been in a crouching position before standing erect and staring in the officer's direction. It had then climbed the guardrail, which would later be found to have scratch marks on them. But unfortunately, no images emerged regarding the marks on these guardrails. In recent years, footage has emerged of a potential frogman in Loveland. Whether or not one believes that it exists or not, one man swears that he had seen this creature and shared his video with the world. Sam Jacobs had been with his girlfriend between Madeira Road and Lake Isabella when they had seen the creature. In the video, one can see an unknown animal that appears to have a head shaped like a frog, and can be seen making its way through the water. Its eyes are glowing due to the low lighting and the use of camera flash that causes a reflective result. In a clearer image grabbed from a video, one can see a strange beast staring directly at Jacobs. After the ordeal that Jacob had encountered, he went on to express that he'd seen a giant frog near or in the water. He had taken a couple of videos and images because he'd never seen a frog that big. He then recalled that it had even stood up on its hind legs and proceeded to walk. He knew that people would think he was crazy for his claims, but maintained that he had seen this creature. He further discusses that he was uncertain whether it had been a frogman or just a giant frog, but whatever it was, Jacob had never seen anything like it before. There's a TikTok account dedicated to this cryptid called Loveland Frogman that has posted some videos relating to the creature. This account has teased about a potential discovery of the legendary frogman, but its authenticity remains a mystery. Various TikTokers have covered the story of the frogman and relay various sightings of them. One account, called the Cryptid Atlas, is dedicated to discussing such creatures. In a 59-second-long video, the account holder discusses the beast. She explains that former Officer Matthews, who had his own experience with the Loveland frog, had his own theory on the situation. After recalling the first event that Shockey had experienced and shared with Matthews initially, he didn't believe him. But he would tell Shockey he'd seen something based on his demeanor. When Matthews had been asked about his own experience a few weeks later, he tells a different story than what was previously believed. Instead of climbing up the guardrail as claimed by Shockey, the creature had instead crawled underneath it. Matthews has no idea what it was, so he fired at it and later claimed that he was able to recover its body. It was alleged that he put it in the trunk of his car until he was able to get to the police station, where he would show his colleagues. When he opened the trunk, Matthews believed that he had solved the case. In the trunk was a large iguana that he believed is what Shockey had initially seen. But this can't be confirmed since images of the scratched guardrails have not been found. Matthews' story, though, varies in different accounts, making it hard to authenticate any of his stories. His sighting had allegedly been the third one relating to the cryptid, with the second one being Shockey's. The first sighting was said to have been in May of 1955, when a businessman claimed to have seen 3 distinct bipedal amphibians on the roadside. He detailed that they had been in a group, almost as if they were congregating. He was the first to have described what the creatures had looked like, and was able to determine their height and other features. The legend of the Loveland Frogman has done the rounds on the internet, with theorists and investigators trying to solve the mystery or confirm its existence. While new information and sightings emerge, it still remains uncertain as to what these creatures might be. Randonautica refers to an application that creates coordinates for adventures that the user can embark on. It's said to turn one's thoughts into reality. In one instance, a user was led to a friendly dog found in the desert, and in separate adventures, a user had found themselves in a field of wildflowers. But Randonautica, as the name suggests, will take the user to various locations, some of which are not as inviting. This application allegedly claims to channel the intentions of the user in order to produce a nearby coordinate for exploration and adventure. The application will ask the user a few questions, including "What would you like to get?" or "Choose your entropy source," before it prompts them to focus on their intent while it finds a location. The process of finding such a location relies on location settings and a number generator, which is not affected by human thoughts, despite what the company might say. Users have been able to access parking lots, grasslands, and different areas of water, but the interest surrounding Randonautica was the strange locations that users have spoken of and released on social media. While some of the stories may be fabricated, there are those that raise a cause for concern. The creators claimed that the app had evolved past its initial intentions, but that sparks another question. What were the intentions? One such strange story occurred when Exploring with Josh, a YouTube channel, enlisted an intention and had been led to an abandoned building. This video was entitled "Police Came, Randonautica Took Me to a Crime Scene." Now, while this title may be misleading, the authorities did in fact show up because the YouTubers had technically been trespassing on private property. This abandoned house had only been partially abandoned, and half had been housed by squatters. It's rather strange that this application would send someone to private property, and would it send the next user to a house that was actually occupied by a resident, who's not so inviting to intruders? An even stranger story had been posted to TikTok by Frozen Meals, in which she and a friend had gone randonauting. They'd been led to a detention center, and when they arrived there, one of them had received a message from an unknown number that read, "Are you real?" What's even stranger is that nearby graffiti had simply read, "Real." In a Reddit post, a user had shared a photo of their experience on the app, which had been certainly terrifying. The caption explained that the individual had gone randonauting at around 3 in the morning and had come back to their shop only to find that it had been destroyed. Comments on this post presented different hypotheses, one of which stated that Randonautica is not so random, and that it could have led the user away from the shop in order to carry out an attack on it, or it could have saved his life from the ordeal that it somehow knew was going to happen. Users have regularly been led to crime scenes, and so was the case for Nick Crowley, who investigates true crime and the paranormal. Crowley was led to a crime scene in the exact spot where police officers had been swarming. The cop cars had formed a circle around the exact same coordinates, clearly indicating that some sort of serious crime had happened there, and that Randonautica wanted him there for one reason or another. While we may never know for sure if there's much more to Randonautica than meets the eye, it's safe to say that this app certainly seems to have a rather creepy history. Number 5. It came past like a speeding jet. and was said to be bigger than a standard Walmart. At least this is what residents who live close to the Texas town of Stephenville have described. They expressed having spotted an object in the sky of January 2008. Many individuals, which included both a police officer and a pilot, had borne witness to a UFO that floated above the farming community for at least 5 minutes before disappearing into the night sky. The pilot, Stephen Allen, had seen the unidentified object while meeting with a few friends by a campfire. He described it as being incredibly large with flashing strobe lights, and that it didn't make a sound, no engine noise, and no wind. He further detailed that the encounter was almost like a religious experience. The UAP reportedly sped off at over 3,000 miles per hour and was shortly followed by 2 F-16 fighter jets that were clearly outmaneuvered. Allen wondered if it was the War of the Worlds. The pilot stated that the aircraft had taken mere seconds to cross one piece of the sky, where it would take him 20 minutes in a Cessna. Allen believes that the UFO was about a half-mile wide and a mile long, making it longer than a Walmart. Written in the Stephenville Empire Tribune about the mysterious encounter, around 40 citizens saw the object, but some were too fearful to come forward about the sighting until others had done so first. The officer who bore witness to this was Officer Leroy Gayton, who recounted that he'd been approaching his car when he suddenly saw a red glow that reminded him of an erupting volcano. In his encounter, Lee explained that the object was floating 3,000 feet in the air, appearing orb-shaped, or something resembling a bubble. The 11 or 12 lights had been bright and pulsating or flashing before speeding off at an incredible speed, before being pursued by 2 jets, just as in Allen's experience. He quickly called for his son to view the sight as well. After this, the officer didn't speak much of the sighting until it appeared in the local newspaper. But the military were skeptical of this event. They passed it off as the resident allowing their imagination to run wild, and said that it was nothing more than an optical illusion. The officials explained the encounter away by saying that all they had seen was a reflection of sunlight on 2 nearby airliners. A nearby Air Force also supported this by saying none of their fighter jets had chased anything down that evening. This encounter had been rather similar to one that occurred at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. 12 United Airlines employees had seen an object that they would later file reports on. There were some varying descriptions of this UAP that seemed to fluctuate. Some believed that the object was an orb, while others had seen a 3-sided flying Dorito. Even with such different details, the Stephenville lights are considered to be among the most credible UAP sightings in the modern era. The Stephenville incident quickly became the talk of the town, and ultimately reached the Mutual UFO Network, which is a United States-based non-profit organization who are dedicated to researching UAPs all over the world. Once they caught wind of this story, they came to investigate. The organization had invited a few people to tell their stories, thinking that only a few individuals would come forward. But dozens of witness sightings appeared, and claimed to have seen these odd things in the sky in Stephenville. Not long after, television crews all the way from Japan to Brazil decided to descend on the town. While the Naval Air Station initially denied that any planes were in this area at the time, the military would soon change their statement and stated that there had been fighter jets who were involved in a training exercise and blamed their denial on miscommunication. Later, witnesses would claim that some members of the government had intimidated them into being silent about what they had seen. In addition, something unique comes up regarding this incident. The whole story seemed to be corroborated by nanotechnology engineer and UFO investigator Robert Powell, who had radar information falling in line with the sightings claimed by both Gayton and Allen. Through the Freedom of Information Act, Powell was able to obtain radar data from 5 antennas in the area from the FAA. It was with this that the investigator was able to track down the routes of the 2 F-16 fighter jets, which were equipped with transponders, since they were government aircraft. Once he was able to determine where the jets were, he could then start to look for objects that had no transponders, and what he found confirmed what both Lee and Allen had told him. There were 2 radar points showing a moving object that was not equipped with a transponder. According to Powell, The 2 points had matched up with the time of both Allan and Lee's encounters, as well as the geographical location as stated by Allan. The pilot had also drawn a picture of what he had seen, and had told an ABC News correspondent, Mike von Fremd, that he had seen an arch shape that converted into a vertical one before splitting and making 2 shapes before turning into fire and speeding off. Rick Sorrells was another one of the witnesses of this encounter. He explained that he was out in the woods, and when he looked at the trees, the object had been right there. Another witness, Claudette Odom, her husband, as well as 2 friends, had been clearing brush from a hilltop close to their house. They'd been on top of a hill with a visibility of over 20 miles in each direction. From the west side, Odom saw an object approaching in the darkness. He'd never seen something quite as fast and thought it was a missile or something similar. After the Air Force had denied that any of their jets had been in the area at that time, Odom thought something was amiss and stated, "I don't know what they're trying to cover up. We saw what we saw," ending with, "I knew they were fighter jets." One theory suggested that what each of the citizens had seen had actually been a jet, which they'd mistaken for an extraterrestrial visitor. The reporter at the Stephenville Empire Tribune, Angelia Joyner, who had broken the story, stated that none of the witnesses think that they had mistook the jets for a large object with dazzling lights. The Air Force's later admission that they did have F-16 jets, the same ones that witnesses described giving chase to the UFO, only supported the story of those who had seen it. Joyner went on to say that it only makes it seem as though something's going on. It had been the 6th of January, 1976, when Mona Stafford was celebrating her 36th birthday, along with her friends Louise Smith and Elaine Thomas. The trio decided to drive 35 miles from their Liberty, Kentucky home to the Redwoods restaurant for dinner. Redwoods is situated between Stanford and Lancaster. Louise had been the one driving in her '67 Chevy Nova. They would go on to have a pleasant dinner, and none of them consumed any intoxicating beverages. It was 45 minutes to midnight when they began to make their way home. Once they'd reached 9 miles out from Lancaster, they would take a turn off Highway 27 and onto Highway 78, heading toward Hustonville. However, it was just outside of Stanford that something incredibly strange took place. In the sky, a stray object appeared and was described as being bright and red. Mona Stafford initially thought that it must have been a plane that had been set ablaze, but this was not the case. As the curious light descended from the right-hand side of the road to an area ahead of the group, it became clear that there was no plane at all. It appeared that the object was larger than 2 houses. The massive object continued before stopping 100 yards ahead and took over both sides of the road. As stated by the women, it would rock back and forth for just a few seconds before moving to the left. Louise proceeded to drive, and they thought the craft had moved on. But as they drove for another quarter of a mile, a sudden blue light emitted through the rear window of the vehicle. At first, they had just assumed it was a highway patrol car with flashing lights, but would find that it was an odd object that had circles around and was coming up behind them. Louise would soon no longer have control of the car, and it had accelerated even though she'd taken her foot off the pedal. The speedometer flew up to 85 miles per hour. Mona had been in the passenger seat and tried to aid Louise in regaining control of the vehicle, but this proved an impossible task. It was stated that all 3 women began to feel a strange burning sensation in their eyes. The ignition lights suddenly lit up, indicating that the car's engine had stalled, but they continued to speed along down the road. As they continued, they would shortly come to a wide, brightly lit road, and only seconds later, this scene would become Highway 78. Mona, Louise, and Elaine would come to realize that they were now on the outskirts of Hustonville, 8 miles away from where they'd been only moments earlier. When they looked at the time, they discovered that an hour and 28 minutes had passed. At 1:25 in the morning, the trio would arrive at Louise's trailer in Liberty. The women hurried inside and tried to figure out what had just happened, and each had a red mark on the back of their necks along with irritated eyes. Louise went off into the bathroom, removed her watch, and proceeded to wash her face, but noted that the hands of the watch had been spinning at quite a speed. After splashing the water onto her face, she felt that the water had caused discomfort or pain in both her face and hands. The trio then headed next door to the home of Lowell Lee and expressed what they just experienced. There, he would have them sketch the object that they'd seen, and each of their drawings were incredibly similar, if not the same. The police were called, along with the local Navy office, but none of them appeared to show any interest in their story. In the days to come, Mona would continue to have problems with her eyes and sought medical assistance for conjunctivitis. Louise's parakeet became terrified of her, and had also experienced some electrical problems in her car. According to the reports, the Navy office had given the information about this story to the media, and it would soon appear in the newspapers. Jerry Black of MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, arranged an interview with these women. In addition to Jerry Black, J. Allen Hynek of the QFOS and Cora Lorenzen of APRO had also taken a look into the case. Initially, the women had refused any interviews, but Black was able to secure a meeting after much persistence of several telephone calls. The women would tell both Black and Peggy Schnell, another investigator, of the incredible details that surrounded their abductions. They had told the investigators of the effects the abduction had on their bodies, such as all three of them having lost weight, with Louise's parakeet becoming frightened when she wanted to touch it. She also recounted the electrical problems with her car, as well as her alarm clock no longer working after she touched it. These different UFO investigators would find that other witnesses had independently also reported a sighting of a UAP in Casey County and Lincoln County on the same evening as the occurrence involving the three women. Dr. R. Leo Sprinkle from the University of Wyoming had gotten word of the case and flew into the area. On the 7th of March in 1976, he would go on to perform a preliminary hypnotic regression on Mona, Louise, and Elaine. It was thereafter believed by investigators that the UFO had abducted the three. In July of that same year, James Young, a Lexington Police Department detective, would give each woman a separate lie detector test about their experience. They passed each of their tests with no issues. It was later that day that more hypnotic regression of the women was performed by Sprinkle. The sessions appeared to be similar to that of Betty and Barney Hill, and that the session would reveal that during the missing time that the women had experienced, they'd actually been taken aboard the object. Aboard the ship, they would undergo medical examinations carried out by shadow beings that would later resemble depictions of aliens. In these hypnotic sessions, all the women had described that they were scanned by the aliens and had instruments attached to their limbs. The aliens in question were described as shadow figures that had frightening eyes. According to the reports, the aliens didn't speak verbally, but rather communicated through telepathy. Strangely enough, the stories were corroborated by other witnesses. One farmer who owned the land where this abduction had taken place saw a flying aircraft of sorts emit a beam of light at a car. All three women appeared to have good reputations. Louise was 44, tall and thin, and she'd brought up her two children by herself and had two grandchildren thereafter. In her free time, she sketched, painted, and took up gospel singing. She was found to be a lifelong member of the Baptist Church and attended the services regularly. Mona was 36 and a former owner of an arts and crafts shop. At the time of the incident, she'd been a secretary for her father's mobile trailer park. She's described as a Christian who attended the Hilltop Church of Christ. Elaine had been a 48-year-old housewife who was a Casey County resident. She and her husband had a daughter and 3 children. She too had been a lifelong churchgoer of the Contown Church of Christ. Number 3. A Hindu temple, which is dedicated to Shiva, is said to be one of the largest temples in India, and is a clear example of the beautiful architecture that was present during its completion in 1010 AD. The temple celebrated its 1000th birthday in 2010, and has since become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The temple stands in fortified walls that have been added during the 16th century. The temple tower, or Vimana, measures at 216 feet, or 66 meters high, and is one of the tallest in the world. The bulbous structure found on the top of the temple had been carved from a single rock weighing 80 tons. In addition to this, there's also a large statue of Nandi, the sacred bull, that's been carved from one single stone that measures at 16 feet, or 4.9 meters long, and 13 feet, or 4 meters high. The temple is made entirely of granite, of which the nearest source is about 60 kilometers west of the building. The temple, like many, also holds some strange alluring secrets and mysteries. The temple belonged to a lush city known as Tanjore, which was the capital of the Chola emperors around 1,000 years ago. While many investigations have been carried out regarding this temple and how it was constructed, it was never completely determined as to how the structure was built. One of the more well-known secrets that the temple keeps is its underground passages. It was found that it holds over 100 passages that lead to various locations, such as the King's Palace, other temples, areas of Tanjore, and other regions entirely. It was also found that some of these tunnels can lead to some dangerous places, and due to there being no map of the routes, all of them have been sealed off. Historians believe that the passages serve as a safety trap. Another famous mystery of the temple is that of the capstone, the aforementioned 80-ton stone. The technique used by the Cholans to transport this heavy stone to the site and then to the peak of the temple is unknown. The temple was constructed during a time when no machines, cable cars, or escalators were available. There have also been questions as to where the granite had come from, since there had not been any quarries nearby. After extensive searches were carried out by researchers, it was found that some of the stones were brought from 2,100 kilometers away. In addition, no one has been able to replicate the carvings of this temple to this day. A special method must have been used during that era in order to achieve the look that the civilization had created. Another marvel that relates to the mysterious temple is that of the towers. Strangely, its shadow does not cast upon the ground. It had been geometrically constructed in the most perfect sense and was found to have impeccable balance, withstanding natural conditions as well as political ones. Some have theorized that a shadow is not cast by the temple due to the way that the basements have been constructed. It's said that the basement of the structure absorbs the shadow of the megalithic temple. But some, however, have dismissed the shadow theory, stating that it's a mere illusion. It was said that due to its immense size, the shadow that it casts falls at a much greater distance, and no one can see it because the shadow falls upon the trees that are planted in the area. The highest tower was found to have a hollow shape where the stones interlock without a form of material that binds it. It's possible that due to the weight of the stones, it's aided in the tower's balance, leaving it standing even after 1,000 years of natural disasters. It's also been said that this tower is the center of the universe, as well as the axis of the world. Furthermore, there was also a set of small stairs discovered above the primary deity that led to the upper area of the tower. If the mantra Om is recited within this hollow space, the divine vibration is said to create an immortal experience. The city of Tanjore had red, fertile soil, and there was no trace of granite stones, which is strange since the entire temple was built from the strongest granites of the world. The method of transporting these pieces of granite by the ancient Cholas still remains a mystery. The sculptures, as well as the holes in the stones, appear to be much too intricate to have been created using copper or iron chisels, which the civilization had during this period. Mystery also surrounds the artwork of the temple, including paintings as well as statues. The high-quality artwork within the temple indicates the artistic excellence of this kingdom during this era. The colors used in the paintings are still vibrant and certainly do not look to be over 1,000 years old. The Nandi statue was made during the Rajaraja Cholan era and is said to have kept growing in size. It's been theorized that this could be due to the unique weather conditions that control the statue's growth. In order to control its growth, it will be kept indoors and nailed to the ground. The current statue, however, that resides at the temple is a single stone creation that was a gift from Maratha rulers during the 17th or 19th centuries. Just like any other ancient megalithic build, aliens were bound to come along. There are some theorists who've suggested that the temple was created by aliens, or that aliens assisted the civilization with means of knowledge to aid them in creating this immense structure. They believe it to be the works of extraterrestrials due to each of the mysteries as listed. From the granite slabs that appeared from nowhere to the lack of binding material holding it all together. It was possibly also the secret chambers hidden within the palace that aided in such theories. The chambers, of course, are off limits to tourists, but it's said that some excellent acoustic techniques had been used during the making of such secret areas. This would allow for a messenger to relay a coded message through a whisper to 3 floors above. An official report was done on a strange incident that occurred on the 27th of January, 1977. Lee Parrish, a 19-year-old, experienced something truly terrifying around 1:05 that morning. The investigators of this alien abduction case were 2 individuals named Don Elkins and Carla Ruckert, who'd been contacted by a hypnotist named Lawrence Allison, who'd worked with the 2 on UFO cases previously. It was stated that Lee's mother had contacted Lawrence after getting the sense that something had happened to her son the previous night. Lee, at the time, was a high school graduate and had a job working at his family's firm, Parrish Supply, as a truck driver and worker. He was described as being 6 feet tall and husky with a polite manner. It appeared to the investigators that he was competent and within his right mind. The boy seemed to be genuinely upset by whatever had happened to him in the early hours of the morning. The occurrence had been in Prospect, Kentucky, when Lee was at his girlfriend Kathy's house. The boy decided to head out after the television show they'd been watching had just ended. Upon his departure, he'd fed the dog and got into his 1970 model Jeepster with a V6 engine. He began his 7-minute-long journey back home in weather that had been cold and cloudy, with some snow covering a bit of the ground. The roads, however, were clear, and there was no rain at the time. He'd been traveling west on Highway 329 and heading to US 42. Lee had been about 4 miles short of US 42 when he spotted an object. He'd initially seen this strange item gliding above the tree line, guessed to be about 100 to 220 feet off the ground at an altitude of 100 to 150 feet. Lee detailed that the UAP was at least 10 feet tall and 40 feet long and appeared as a perfect rectangle. The object was the color of the setting sun, but had been too bright to look at constantly. Soon, the boy would become rather scared or creeped out, and immediately wanted to leave the area, but he couldn't do so. Lee had expressed that he was not even sure how the car had remained on the road, because he was not driving it, and about 15 seconds into the encounter, the car radio failed. Lee carried on watching the UAP as it continued to hover until it was right above him. It then suddenly sped off at the speed of a jet to the northwest and didn't make a single sound. When he arrived back home, his mother met him at the door, asking what was wrong with his eyes. After he looked at himself in the mirror, Lee could see his eyes to be extremely red and irritated. He would then discover that the time was 1:45 in the morning, meaning that his route from Kathy's had taken 45 minutes instead of 7. His mother confirmed the time that he arrived home, and his girlfriend corroborated his departure. Initially, Lee had been rather anxious about the idea of being placed under hypnosis, but after Lawrence and Don had spoken to him about the techniques that he would experience, he began to feel reassured. Lawrence, the hypnotist, would spend about 40 minutes relaxing the subject in order to achieve the desired state. He would then proceed to subject Lee to several childhood ages before bringing him up to the time of the encounter. He was then prompted to speak of the story as it was happening to him. It had been an eerie case for the observer to have ventured through the sequence of events with the boy. Upon leaving Kathy's house, Lee had come to see the rectangular UAP. He detailed under hypnosis that he thought it was a fire at first, but would reject this hypothesis before immediately becoming scared. He would then ask himself continuously, "What is it?" He would express that his eyes were hurting due to the brightness of the object, but he was unable to look away. He recounted that it didn't appear as though the object was moving, but it had somehow found its way right above him. Lee would become increasingly more frightened and said, "It's not moving," in a confused tone. For a second, the craft would change from black and then to white, and soon he was no longer in his Jeep, but rather in a circular white room. He had no knowledge of this transition and how he ended up in this room. It was 20 feet in diameter, and the ceiling reached 20 feet high. Before him, there stood 3 items, which he felt were sentient, even though they were not human. They'd been red, black, and white, the 3 colors of the craft. He believed that they were machines or creatures. The black one resembled something like a tombstone texture and stood quite tall. It had a singular pointed arm. The next was the white one, which had been wider and stood only at 6 feet. It had 2 unmoving appendages and a wedge-like head. It was known that this white figure had been the leader and would emit an odd sound like teeth being brushed. When he looked at the third, Lee saw that the red one had been the smallest and was rectangular shaped. He believed that this one had been scared of him as it approached and touched his forehead and above his ear. Upon this touch, Lee would feel a cold sensation and later thought that it had been some sort of analysis. The black entity had also touched Lee after moving slowly towards him, revealing a featureless head. It would proceed to make contact with Lee on his left side and his back, which had further terrified him. Throughout the hypnosis, it's alleged that the boy continuously repeated, "No, no, not the black one." The black one would also cause a cold and burning sensation and would make him feel as though he was vibrating. During the entirety of the abduction, Lee felt cold and the ship had a boat on water motion, rocking back and forth. Later, more details would be presented regarding the white being, which was said to glow and sat in the middle of the room watching their abductee. The red one would then go with the white one by going behind it or sometimes merging with it. After the red one had completed its purpose, the white one would begin to emit a sound of sandpaper or a scraping noise. Lee now felt suddenly warm. The white one then went to the black one, either going behind it or merging, but Lee could no longer see both the white and red. He was then left alone and shortly after appeared back in his Jeep. Under the hypnotic state, there had been no transition from being in the room to the awareness of being back in his Jeep. Later, the investigators asked about the method of transport of the mechanism. Lee explained that the ship had caught his Jeep as one would expect from a mousetrap. The day after the sighting had taken place, the electrical system of the vehicle had gone faulty. The abductee would later express that he'd been somewhat interested in UFOs, and when he was in high school, read a book about UFOs, and had an interest in psychic phenomena. Lee explained that he'd previously experienced strange events, such as willing an outdoor light to turn on, even though it had been unplugged. Helene Smith was born on the 9th of December, 1861, and had grown to become a famous late 19th century medium. She'd become known as the muse of automatic writing by surrealists, who were said to have viewed her as evidence of the power of the surreal, as well as a symbol of surrealist knowledge. Later in her life, Smith would go on to claim that she had the ability to speak with Martians, and had been the reincarnation of both a Hindu princess as well as Marie Antoinette. Smith had been the child of a Hungarian merchant who worked as an employee in a commercial house. In 1891, she discovered spiritualism and joined the Spiritualist Development Circle. According to the believers, Smith had started to show evidence of medium abilities in 1892. Smith had also stated that she'd communicated with Victor Hugo and Cagliostro. Soon, the medium became famous in Geneva. Smith's channeling would evolve from the raps and table tipping to trances. When in this state, she would experience imagery of faraway places, including that of a civilization on Mars, as well as her alleged past lives. She would additionally write out the Martian words on paper, which she would later translate into French. In 1900, Smith would grow in her popularity after a publication called Des Indes à la Planète Mars was released by Theodore Flournoy, who'd become acquainted with Smith in Geneva. The publication, when translated, was titled From India to the Planet Mars. Theodore had been a professor of psychology at the University of Geneva, and he and Smith remained close up until 1899, before the publication was made. The book would go on to document her series of experiences in terms of romantic cycles, which included the Martian cycle, Ultra-Martian cycle, Hindu cycle, Oriental cycle, and the Royal cycle. It was in 1900 that an American spiritualist, Mrs. Jackson, who became impressed with Smith, would offer her a salary that permitted her to end her job and become dedicated to pursuing her own experiences. Smith had accepted this and was able to go forth with further cycles. She would then begin to paint the visions that she'd seen, as well as religious images of Christ. There were 3 main spirit stories relating to Smith that had been narrated in a serial form. The first had been that of a Hindu princess. According to the story, the medium was able to replicate the sense of an Oriental princess with the poses of a priestess, as well as singing melodies, and it even stretched across the sofa with the elegance of movements of a real princess. What was incredibly intriguing, though, was the Sanskrit in which Smith could write and speak, which is a language that she had very little knowledge of. Her writings would also present a couple of Arabic passages. The second story had the medium acting like an aristocratic lady who spoke French in the way that it had been spoken a century prior. This was believed to be the spirit of that of Marie Antoinette. It had been Smith's third most prominent story that was perhaps the most extraordinary, and that was of her journey to the planet Mars. It was stated in her Martian language that Smith had spoken of brilliant colors and of her flight to space. She then detailed a world that was very similar to that of Earth, but instead it was inhabited by disembodied spirits. She recounted carriages that would glide by without being pulled along by a horse or wheels. Houses on this land were equipped with fountains on the roofs, and men and women would dress almost the same. After various analysis by many different people had been done on the stories as told by Smith, one author, Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote the Sherlock Holmes novels, detailed a strange phenomenon that was known as automatic writing. He would describe a writer's creativity as a process that had been guided by the writer's subconscious or by the spirits of an external world. But like many others who had become intrigued by the occult and esoteric, could not come to a definite conclusion. Automatic writing was a well-observed practice among the esoteric people, such as mediums, who were believed to be in contact with the other world. They would arrange sittings and seances, ultimately grabbing the attention of the Society for Psychical Research that had been established in 1882 in London. Behavioral scientists would then travel around the world to study the methods that these mediums would make use of, and would attempt to find a rational explanation for these occult practices. While Smith was largely met with skepticism, no one could prove her claims as untrue. But it was stated that her stories had been that of fabrication, with some evidence to support such stories. But researchers such as Doyle believed her stories and came up with various theories, such as spirit embodiments, as well as visions of another world as a source of where Smith had gotten her information. 28-year-old Devante Marquez Richardson was described by family and friends as a man with a big heart who poured his soul into everything he did. Whether Devante was working a 9-to-5 or pursuing his dream, he was determined to be the best. In 2020, Devante's family noticed a change in him, and it wasn't for the better. He began exhibiting odd behavior that they were able to pass off at first. That was until he mysteriously vanished after telling a friend that he was going to help Kanye West. On June 9, 1992, Devante entered the world. He and his mother lived in Washington, D.C., surrounded by loving friends and family. In 2003, when Devante was 11 years old, he temporarily moved to Missouri to be with his father. He continued to flourish academically, even with a change of school and environment, and in 2010 he graduated from high school. Little is known about his time in high school or his time in Missouri with his father, but after graduating, Devante attended at Lincoln University in Missouri for a few semesters, but it didn't end up working out. He decided to leave Missouri and return to his mother in Mississippi Avenue in Washington, D.C. In D.C., Devante worked a traditional job during the day and pursued his passions by night. According to his Facebook page, Devante, who went by the name D. Rich, was the CEO of Big Blues Studio, a company that offered graphic design and other services to those who work in the music industry. Devante dreamed of becoming a music producer and working with local artists to help kickstart their careers. Devante also worked as a tattoo artist, taking clients in his spare time. By 2020, Devante was 28 years old and was beginning to see the fruits of his labor. At this time, he was a manager at a local grocery store and felt that he had a secure career. Unfortunately, 2020 and the preceding years would prove to be tough for business, big and small, as the world would come to a standstill. Devante lost his job as the store was forced to close. This left him feeling hopeless and depressed. According to his aunt, Marquita Richardson, Devante took a job with Uber to try to gain an income, but this venture didn't last. By July of 2020, Devante and the entire world felt lost. Everything had changed within the blink of an eye, and people were forced to rearrange their lives and find new solutions. While the weight of the world rested on his shoulders, Devante maintained a bright outlook. When visiting friends and family, they noticed that something was upsetting or bothering Devante, but chalked this up to the loss of his job. Then, on July 20th, 2020, something bizarre happened. At around 11 p.m. that evening, Devante left his home in his blue 2016 Jeep Compass. His mother assumed he was going to visit friends, but the truth would be far darker than that. Marquita, Devante's aunt, commented to the Great Bull Standard that they didn't realize Devante was missing until July 22nd. Upon realizing he was missing, they immediately reported this to the DC Metropolitan Police Department. The search for Devante would begin, and that's when they discovered his last communications. In an unsettling text sent to a friend on July 20th, Devante said he was headed to Cody, Wyoming, over 2,000 miles from Washington, D.C. The real reason for his visit was to meet with Kanye West, who has a ranch in the Bighorns. Devante had not expressed this to his family, and this clue would send the case into a tailspin. Investigators later discovered Devante's YouTube account with videos that have now been removed where he states that he and Kanye need to talk. His family believed that Devante may have been trying to jumpstart his music career by connecting with one of the biggest producers in the industry. On July 27th, the case took another turn when a blue 2016 Jeep Compass was discovered abandoned on a dirt road 8 miles from Grable, Wyoming. For 2 days, the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office attempted to trace the owner, to no avail. On July 29th, the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office ran the license plate through their databases and discovered that it belonged to Devante. After digging into his file, they discovered that his family had reported him missing from Washington, D.C. days earlier. The Bighorn Police Department contacted D.C., and a cross-country investigation began. Inside the car, investigators found Devante's laptop, keys, and 2 phones. Bighorn Sheriff Ken Blackburn immediately spotted several red flags when he processed the car. Talking to the Cowboy State Daily, he said, quote, "The car itself didn't present any evidence of somebody driving straight through across the United States. It was very clean and well kept. There was an absence of fast food wrappers and those types of things that would build up during a sustained road trip." As evidence had taken them across state lines, both parties agreed to get the FBI involved in the investigation. Following the discovery of Devante's car, the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office and FBI office searched the remote wilderness by horseback, foot, and utilized drones and helicopters. Canine units were also brought to the scene but were unable to find Devante's scent. Kanye West's team were also contacted, and they confirmed that Kanye did not have any contact with Devante in July of 2020. Devante had never met Kanye West, so it's unclear why he referred to him as his buddy. Investigators noted that Devante's car was found around 20 miles from Kanye's property, in the Bighorns, but it doesn't appear that Devante ever made it there. Reports don't indicate that Devante's car was broken into or damaged, and the reason for its abandonment remains a mystery. Marquita Richardson, Devante's aunt, told the police that he had no history of mental illness or run-ins with the law. He was a quiet and hard-working young man who desperately wanted to make it in the music business. Since 2020, multiple searches have been carried out, but the Wyoming wilderness is expansive, and investigators have been unable to find any sign of him. Devante didn't know anybody in Wyoming, apart from knowing about Kanye's ranch. Shortly after Devante's disappearance reached local news, a witness came forward with a possible sighting. On July 26th, they saw a man that looked like Devante at a gas station 150 miles from Grable, where his car was found. The witness claimed that Devante got into the passenger seat of a white Jeep that was being driven by a white female. The Bighorns County Sheriff's Department jumped on this lead, but it proved to be a dead end. In the years since Devante's disappearance, Sheriff Ken Blackburn told the media that they had investigated hundreds of reported sightings. These sightings came from the Yellowstone National Park southeast and west into South Dakota and several other places. Unfortunately, like the previous sighting, these panned out to nothing. Almost 4 years later, Devante remains missing, and the circumstances of his disappearance remain a mystery. Devante Marquez Richardson is described as a black male with black hair, brown eyes, 6'1" and 170 pounds. He has tattoos on both arms, his left hand, and the word blue across his knuckles. Anyone with information is asked to contact Ashley Rogers of the DC Metropolitan Police Department at 202-576-6768, quoting case number 20107-444. or FBI's VICAP at 800-634-4097. 30-year-old Tracy Pittman was described as a bright and energetic woman by the residents of the small town of Wetumpka, Alabama. Tracy's loved ones described her as a person who always put others first and strived to take care of everyone. In 1998, Tracy's life was on an upswing. She was about to start a new job, and her personal life had been ridden of chaos. That was until one evening in April of 1998. This night would change the lives of Tracy's family and the residents of Wetumpka forever. On March 15, 1968, Stephen and Linda Pittman welcomed their daughter Tracy Pittman into the world. The family resided in Montgomery, Alabama, and by all accounts, Tracy enjoyed a happy and healthy upbringing. She did well in school and would go on to seek further education and training. In the early 1990s, Tracy's life changed when she met Greg Kegley. The two instantly hit it off, and in 1993, the pair married. The first few years of their marriage were filled with bliss and harmony. In 1995, Tracy discovered she was pregnant with Greg, sharing her joy and excitement. By 96, Tracy and Greg welcomed their daughter, Peyton, into the world. The two found themselves surrounded by the usual stresses of parenthood, which put their relationship to the test. In 1997, a year after Peyton was born, Tracy and Greg divorced. According to reports, the divorce was amicable, but the custody arrangement for their daughter remains unclear. After divorcing Greg, Tracy moved herself and Peyton into her parents' home in Eclectic, Alabama. Stephen and Linda Pittman were overjoyed to have their grandchild and daughter living with them, and knew the arrangement was only temporary until Tracy got on her feet. Peyton grew into a happy and bright toddler under the watchful eyes of 3 guardians. On April 11, 1998, the paperwork had finally been processed, and Tracy and Greg were granted their decree absolutes, officially dissolving their marriage. This event filled Tracy with sadness at the loss of her marriage, but also hope at what else life had in store for her. To help support herself and her daughter, Tracy worked at the Alabama Reference Laboratory in Montgomery, a 45-minute drive from her parents' home. She also had previously worked at Russell Medical Center in Alexander City. At both clinics, Tracy worked as a trained phlebotomist, an achievement she was exceedingly proud of. Following her divorce, she felt that it was time for more changes in her life. She'd recently obtained a new job at a dental office, and she was due to start on Monday, April 27, 1998. Before Tracy could begin this new chapter of her career, tragedy would strike, leading her family on a decades-long hunt for justice and answers. On the evening of Sunday, April 26, 1998, Tracy grabbed Peyton and placed her in the car seat of her white 1993 Geo Storm. She told her parents that she was going out to run a few errands and would be back soon. Employees of a BP gas station on US Highway 231 North in Elmore County, Alabama, confirmed that Tracy filled up her car at around 6:30 p.m. that night. This account was also corroborated by customers. This was the last time that Tracy Pittman was ever seen or heard from. When she and Peyton failed to return home later that evening, her parents immediately set out looking for her. They searched the streets of Eclectic but found no sign of her whatsoever. After a failed search attempt, Stephen and Linda contacted the Elmore County Sheriff's Office to report the pair missing. Early the next morning, the Elmore County Sheriff's Office received a call from authorities in Wetumpka, 14.5 miles from Eclectic. A passerby had reported seeing an abandoned white 1993 Geo Storm off of Old Georgia Road. The car itself was a bizarre sight, but as drivers took a further look, they saw a child strapped into the car seat with no parent in sight. Investigators were dispatched to the scene, which was around 10 minutes from the gas station where Tracy had last been seen. The Elmore County Sheriff's Office already knew of Tracy's disappearance, which made this discovery all the more troubling. In April of 1998, Old George Road was under construction, and Tracy's car was found around construction signs and warnings that the road ahead was closed. Investigators believed that Tracy had planned on driving back to her parents' home, but they couldn't understand why Tracy would have driven down a road under construction. There were alternative routes available back to Eclectic. When the Elmore County Sheriff's Office processed the car, they found that it was unlocked, the keys were in the ignition, and the radio was humming softly in the background. Tracy had just filled up her car with gas, and the car was in perfect working order. So why had she abandoned it? Greg Kegley, Tracy's ex-husband of just 15 days, was cleared as a suspect and was handed custody of their daughter. Search parties banded together and were sent to investigate nearby quarries and gravel pits that had been flooded due to bad weather. According to one report, a lake was also searched, but no sign of Tracy was found. In the years since Tracy's disappearance, the Elmore County Sheriff's Office has utilized cadaver dogs, drones, mapping technology, walking searches, and dive teams, as reported by the Wetumpka Herald. For decades, Tracy's case sat cold. But then, in 2018, the Elmore County Sheriff's Office and the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation announced that they were executing a search warrant. The warrant covered over 300 acres of rural land where investigators hoped to find more clues. In 2015, Crime Stoppers aired a segment about Tracy's case, which led to a tip being called in. This tip ultimately led the police to that 300-acre stretch of land, although the nature of the tip has never been revealed. Since the 2018 announcement, Tracy's case has gone cold once more. Her parents funded billboards across Elmore County, hoping to keep her case alive and generate more leads. But few viable leads have come from this. April 26, 2024 will mark the 26th anniversary of Tracy's disappearance, and her family hopes that this year may finally be the year they get answers. Tracy Pittman is described as a white female with brown hair, green to hazel eyes, 5'10" and 140 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Rick Lowry of the Elmore County Sheriff's Office at 334-567-5546, quoting case number M117707327. Born sometime in 1914 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the rest of Martha Alice Mertz's early life remains as mysterious as her disappearance. With the passage of time, Martha's case has become buried under the mountains of missing person cases that plague American investigators on a daily basis. Without social media or mass media interest, Martha's disappearance was known only to those close to her or within the community. Now, with the power of social media, a generation of internet sleuths is determined to get to the bottom of the mystery once and for all. 47-year-old Martha Mertz, maiden name unknown, was described as a happy and kind woman. Her family described her as fond of money, and she knew how to pinch pennies when it mattered most. She was incredibly thrifty, preferring to turn old fabric into new clothes instead of disposing of it. She worked at the Hubley Manufacturing Company, which produced cast iron products. Martha was a punctual and hardworking employee who was well liked by her colleagues. In the late 1940s, Martha met J. Kelvin Mertz, and the pair quickly fell in love. By 1950, the pair were married, and soon after moved into an apartment at 40 West Vine Street in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, their marriage was anything but blissful, and the pair could always be heard arguing. On several occasions, Martha would storm out of the apartment and call her sisters or her parents. Eventually, Martha would return to 40 West Vine Street, where the relationship would settle for a little while. The cycle of arguments continued as the years went by, and by 1961, Martha was becoming tired of the constant screaming. She told one friend that she wanted to leave Jay, and that she was planning to one day run away and nobody would know where she was. Her friend didn't take this comment seriously and supported her through this difficult time. June 22nd of 1961 started out like any other for Martha. She awoke early and got herself ready for the day before heading off to work. Later that evening, she returned with Jay, following shortly after. At around 8 p.m., Martha and Jay found themselves embroiled in yet another argument. Another tenant of the apartment building would later tell the Lancaster Bureau of Police that the argument sounded no different to the other arguments the couple had. After several minutes of arguing, Jay told Martha that he was stepping out to buy some cigarettes and was going to take a walk to clear his head. When he returned from his trip, he found that his wife was gone. He assumed that Martha had taken off like many times before, and he decided to call his brother Daniel Mertz. According to the Lancaster New Era newspaper, Jay visited his brother that evening and requested to borrow some money. With this money, Jay made the 1,110-mile drive from his home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, to his sister's home in Palm Beach, Florida. He would later tell the Lancaster police that he did this so he could cool off from the argument. Days after the argument had taken place and Martha had walked out, she was reported missing by her sister, Lena Pike, who had not heard from her in several days. Lena and the Lancaster police were surprised to hear that Jay was in Florida and not out looking for his wife. According to the Lancaster New Era, it was Daniel Mertz, Jay's brother, that notified him of his wife's disappearance, which prompted him to drive back to Pennsylvania. The Lancaster police questioned Jay at length, but he was unable to provide them with any answers. He stated that his wife had taken a suitcase, but wasn't able to name the contents of the suitcase. Bizarrely, Martha's new outfits, which she had carefully purchased just days before her disappearance, sat still on the coat hangers in her wardrobe. Once the questioning was over, Jay returned to Florida. En route to Florida, he claimed to have visited Martha's parents in Bishopville, South Carolina. Martha's parents had also not heard from her since June 22nd. During their investigation, the Lancaster police discovered that Martha had tucked $4,500 away in a savings account at the Lancaster County Bank. She also had $3,833 in her pension account from the Hubley Manufacturing Company. Martha and Jay also had a shared account which held about $2,000. On July 5th, Martha withdrew $800 from this account, and the last deposit to her savings account was made on June 19, 1961, where she deposited $26. They also made another bizarre discovery. Martha had failed to claim two paychecks. The first was for the week ending on June 18, 1961, and the second was for the week ending on June 25th. This wasn't the only uncashed check from the Hubley Manufacturing Company, as Martha had also failed to collect a $150 check that covered 3 weeks' holiday. After her disappearance, none of her accounts were accessed, and it appears that the majority of her income had been tucked away into her savings account. It's now been almost 63 years since Martha disappeared, and her case has failed to generate any substantial media coverage. There have been no updates or leads, and her case remains cold. Martha Alice Mertz is described as a white female with sandy brown hair, blue eyes, and 5 foot to 5'2" and 100 to 120 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Richard Mendez of the Lancaster Bureau of Police at 717-735-3300, quoting case number 0508-024-860. 46-year-old Wendy Lynn Kahn was described by her daughter as a loving and devoted mother, friend, and colleague. Wendy's kind and caring disposition had garnered her a good group of friends and a solid career. Wendy and her 21-year-old daughter, Anisha, shared an especially close bond, as they'd been on their own for many years during Anisha's childhood. In 2011, Wendy got into a new relationship, and from there, her life seemed to be on the rise. Fast forward 7 years, and Wendy would disappear under bizarre circumstances. In 2011, Wendy met Mohammed Bilal Chugtai, who had immigrated from Pakistan to the United States in the mid-1980s. For many years, the boundaries and definition of their relationship remained unclear. Reports indicate that the pair were not exclusive and likely saw other people. During the 2010s, Wendy lived all over the northern US, residing in Iowa, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota. Finally, Wendy decided to settle in Minnesota with her daughter Anisha. As the years went by, Wendy and Mohammed continued to see each other, and their relationship was anything but peaceful, with one report describing it as tumultuous. The pair would frequently argue about different matters, with the arguments becoming loud and explosive. In September of 2017, Mohammed asked Wendy a big question. He asked her to move in with him at his home in Minnesota. Wendy hoped that this would be the fresh start that they both needed, and accepted the move. As per the Charlie Project, December of 2017 was also the first time the pair began to see each other exclusively. Shortly after moving in with Mohammed, Wendy began to think it might have been a mistake. The arguments continued and the mood was tense. By May of 2018, Wendy knew that she had to get out of there and confided in her daughter Anisha that the relationship wasn't working. Mohammed agreed with Wendy, telling her that he was going to sell the home. Following this announcement, Wendy and Anisha began hunting for apartments for her, but before they got to visit any of them, Wendy disappeared. On May 31st, 2018, Anisha would see her mother for the last time. That day, Wendy accompanied her daughter to a doctor's appointment before the two ran some errands. After running errands, the pair went back to the home Wendy shared with Mohammed, which instantly created problems. According to reports, Anisha and Mohammed had previously argued, which created a lot of tension. When Mohammed walked into the living room and saw Anisha sitting there, he immediately began to shout at her, telling her to get out of his house. He continued shouting, telling her he would call the police if she didn't leave. Wendy was able to defuse the situation and gave Anisha a ride home. On June 1st, 2018, Anisha called her mother after she had finished work, something the pair usually did. Anisha told police that the call was brief, around 15 minutes, and everything seemed fine with her mother. The two talked about their day and what they had planned. During the call, Anisha offered to spend the evening with her mother, to which Wendy responded, "No, you have plans. Don't worry about me. Have fun." Shortly after, the two disconnected the call. This would be the last time anyone would hear from Wendy Kahn. On June 2nd, 2018, Anisha tried to call her mother, as was routine, but Wendy wasn't answering. After several missed calls, Anisha decided to stop by her mother's home and was shocked to find it empty. Neither Wendy nor Mohammed was home, and Wendy's black 2011 Nissan Sentra was also missing. Throughout the night, Anisha continued trying to contact her mother to no avail. Concerned, Anisha called her father, Wendy's ex-husband, and asked for help. The following day, June 3rd, 2018, the pair went down to the Mankato Department of Public Safety to report Wendy missing. And while the report was taken, it was clear that the officers didn't take it seriously. Anisha showed investigators texts between Wendy and Mohammed, which they immediately laughed off, commenting that Wendy was playing the victim. Anisha also claims that while the report was being filed, nobody issued her a case number, contact number, or even a badge number. Instead, she was told to dial 911 if she had any questions or required an update. Later, the same police department told Anisha, quote, "You know, her case is still open, but it's not a top priority case right now." The next update in Wendy's case didn't come until a week after she was last seen, on June 7th, 2018. Her black 2011 Nissan Sentra was found abandoned in the 200 block of Bell Avenue behind a CVS pharmacy. Bizarrely, the driver's side tire had been punctured. It was later determined that this puncture was intentional and had been caused by a blade. A large-scale search for Wendy was finally put together upon the discovery of her car, but her family feared that it may have been too late. A search of the home Wendy and Mohammed shared showed no signs of foul play, and Wendy had left everything behind, including her beloved cats. The only items that remained unaccounted for were Wendy's purse and phone. Investigators dove into her accounts and discovered that her bank was last accessed or used on May 30th, 2018, and her phone was last used on June 2nd. In July of 2018, Wendy's case would take another bizarre turn when Mohammed sold his home overnight and then disappeared. He left behind his car and other personal belongings and didn't even collect the proceeds from the sale of his home. According to the police, Mohammed has never officially been reported missing, and the status of his whereabouts is still unknown. While digging into Mohammed's background, investigators did find some troubling information. At the time of Wendy's disappearance, Mohammed had 2 active warrants for violating his probation, stalking, and violating a restraining order in Blue Earth County, Minnesota. According to sources, these charges stem from Mohammed's previous marriage, and it stated that he stalked his ex-wife and his children. Mohammed also has a misdemeanor conviction for domestic assault in his previous relationship. It's important to note that Mohammed has not been named a suspect or even a person of interest in Wendy's disappearance, and his whereabouts still remain a mystery. Wendy Lynn Kahn is described as a white female with red or auburn hair, green eyes, 5'5" and 160 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Jason Bennett of the Mankato Department of Public Safety at 507-387-8780, quoting case number 1816961. 21-year-old Rose Marie Bly was described as a loving mother to her 2 children and nieces and nephews. Rose worked incredibly hard to provide for her 2 children and had big dreams of her own. After work, Rose enjoyed riding horses and hoped to one day become a published children's author. She loved children and enjoyed working with them, something that spoke to her kind and calm temperament. In 2009, Rose's family received the call that most parents dread. She was missing, and nobody had any idea what happened to her. On September 16, 1987, Candace Harrer and Clyneth Bly welcomed Rosemarie Bly into the world. The family, including siblings, would grow up in the small town of Grantsburg, Wisconsin. Candace Wells, Rose's sister, recalled their childhood, noting how it was a peaceful existence close to a state forest. As a child, Rose discovered horse riding and was immediately hooked. She would sneak into the fields and ride horses any chance she could get, even if she was supposed to be doing homework or chores. In 2005, Rose graduated from Grantsburg High School, and she wasn't sure what direction to take next. During her time at Grantsburg High School, Rose met Christopher Larson, and the two became an item. Their relationship continued after graduation, and months after throwing their caps in the air, they discovered they were expecting a child. Soon after, Rose and Chris welcomed their daughter into the world. Shortly after the arrival of their daughter, they moved from Grantsburg to the city of St. Croix Falls. The pair worked hard to navigate being first-time parents, as well as young adults. By all accounts, they were a happy family unit, and just 18 months after their first child was born, the couple welcomed another daughter into the world. The pressures of adult life and parenthood began to show in their relationship. The pair would frequently argue, with these arguments sometimes becoming physical. In early 2009, the Polk County Sheriff's Office was called to the Larson home on a call of a domestic disturbance. Rose's family would state that it was Chris who was physical towards Rose, but on this occasion, it was Rose who would be charged with physical assault. According to the Charlie Project, Chris accused Rose of slapping him, while Rose stated that he had put her in a headlock and banged her head on the ground. In February of 2009, the pair wed in a ceremony surrounded by friends and family, but now that marriage was in jeopardy. Following this incident, Chris filed a motion for divorce in June of 2009, citing Rose's physical assault. The divorce didn't go through, as Chris withdrew the motion weeks later, when he and Rose eventually got back together. The pair hoped that this would be the new start and breath of fresh air that their relationship needed. And after this, it appears the relationship got back on track. According to Chris, Rose was seen for the last time on August 21, 2009, at around 7:30 p.m., when she left her home in St. Croix Falls. That evening, Rose left in her white 2001 Pontiac Grand Am to drive to the nearby town of Cushing, Wisconsin. Rose had planned to meet up with her cousin at a bar where they wanted to do some karaoke. A few hours after leaving, Rose called Chris to let him know that she was going to be out late and to anticipate her home around midnight. This was the last time that Chris ever spoke to his wife again. When Rose failed to return home that evening, Chris immediately became worried and contacted the Polk County Sheriff's Department. Investigators were sent to the family home on River Road, and they began retracing her last steps. The first stop on the investigators' list was the bar that Rose was headed to in Cushing, just 5 miles from St. Croix Falls. The Polk County Sheriff's Department contacted Rose's cousin, and that's when they learned something bizarre. Rose's cousin explained that there were no plans to meet up the night before. Investigators continued to question Rose's cousin, who was adamant that the pair had never arranged to meet at a bar for drinks or karaoke. This would just be the first of a puzzling trail of clues in Rose's disappearance. On August 26, 2009, 5 days after Rose disappeared, her white 2001 Pontiac Grand Am was found abandoned in Grantsburg, Wisconsin, 14 miles from Cushing and 27 miles from her home in St. Croix Falls. Investigators were puzzled. If Rose had been heading for Cushing, why was her car found 14 miles north in her hometown of Grantsburg? According to reports, Rose's mother and family members still lived in Grantsburg, but none of them recalled seeing her after she disappeared on August 21st of 2009. According to the Polk County Sheriff's Office, the location where Rose's car was found was a parking lot behind a post office, which is usually used by truck drivers parking up their trailers. In their report, they didn't note any damage to the car, and the only thing missing aside from Rose were the keys. In the wake of this discovery, investigators in Grantsburg also joined in on the search for Rose. Searchers and volunteers scoured St. Croix Falls, Cushing, and Grantsburg for her, but there was no sign of her. Her mobile phone records were scoured, but nothing of note was found. Interestingly, the Charlie Project notes that 3 weeks after Rose disappeared, Chris refiled for divorce. Chris Larson also tried to take out a court order against Rose, which would have prevented her from returning and taking the children. It's unknown whether this court order or divorce stemmed from the previous June 2009 incident. While talking to Candace Harrer, investigators also uncovered another possible clue. A week before Rose disappeared, she had fallen from a horse. During a call between the mother and daughter, Rose told Candace that she was having headaches that were causing her significant pain. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that Rose sought medical treatment for this injury, and it's unknown whether this was a contributing factor in her disappearance. A year after Rose disappeared, in 2010, Chris Larson was granted the divorce and full custody of his 2 daughters. The Polk County Sheriff's Department also commented that Chris was not considered a suspect and had passed a lie detector test. 12 years after Rose's bizarre disappearance, the Bly family would be struck with yet another tragedy. On June 15th of 2021, Summer Wells, the niece of Rose, disappeared from her home in Rogersville, Tennessee. Just like her aunt's case, the disappearance of Summer remains unsolved. While the 2 cases are not thought to be connected, they are an eerie coincidence and a source of pain for the family. Rosemarie Bly is described as a white female with brown hair, brown eyes, 5 foot to 5'2", and 100 to 110 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Polk County Sheriff's Department at 715-485-8366, quoting case number 1724-2009, or contact FBI VICAP at 800-634-4097. A search has been underway for the suspects in these video images by the Boise authorities. They're seeking answers to a rather creepy criminal incident that's been captured on camera. Nowadays, there are cameras situated almost everywhere, from CCTV to doorbell ring cameras. Nothing goes unseen on a business premises, a parking lot, or even at someone's residence. And luckily for this resident, their camera was able to capture the moment that an unknown individual attempted to enter their house. In the following case, an attempted home invasion occurred in Boise, near Cloverdale and Steck on West Granger Street. This creepy ordeal has left the investigating authorities searching for answers and suspects that were involved. The resident of this home had shared the footage of the attempted break-in online. It appeared that the attempted home invasion began at the back door of the home. The video had been captured by the resident himself. It's presumed to have been recorded on their mobile phone. After hearing some noises, the homeowner approached what appeared to be the patio door that led to the backyard. Once they were there, an unidentified male could be seen dressed in black and had been fiddling with the door. As the camera neared, the individual could be seen more visibly on the other side of the door. He'd quite obviously been trying to break in by picking the lock or dismantling the mechanism. The suspect suddenly looked up to find that he was being recorded. He wore a mask to further conceal his identity. He came to notice that he'd been caught. He then turns around to make a run for it, where a second suspect now comes into view. Both of the men can be heard running off in a panic, but they didn't appear to be running very fast. The resident proceeded to film the whole ordeal. When the resident reaches the front door, the 2 men can be seen running off into the distance. The local authorities, as well as Crime Stoppers, had posted the following statement to social media, saying, quote, "The victim stated that he'd heard someone knocking on the front door shortly before a crash. Going to the back door, the victim observed someone attempting to break into the residence. Upon seeing the victim, the person ran out of the backyard along with another male. The victim was able to use their cell phone to record the male attempting to break in." Most people would not know how to react in a situation, but the community is shocked that the resident had pulled out their phone to record the ordeal in what could have been a potentially life-threatening situation. There are said to be various crime-related incidents happening in Boise these days, so many that a list has been compiled of the unsolved acts. In one incident, a woman had stolen decorations from a resident's porch. Grand theft had also made its way onto the list, along with graffiti vandalism. In South Orchard Street, it was alleged that felony malicious injury to property had occurred there. vehicle burglary on 2 accounts, aggravated battery, commercial burglary, trespassing, and various other burglaries and acts of vandalism seem to have plagued the area in recent times. There are additionally 19 individuals currently on the most wanted list of Boise. This includes individuals such as Roberto Ballesteros, Parvin Adili, Sebastian Delgado, and Jacob Liebert, to name a few. The recorded attempted home invasion is one of many criminal acts that are currently underway in the area. Luckily, the homeowner had heard the noises and went to investigate. Otherwise, they may have found themselves in a much more dangerous situation. Occasionally, some individuals will fake their own disappearances or kidnappings for unknown reasons. Such was the case in the story of Sherry Papini. The story began with the release of CCTV footage that had shown the moment after Papini was allegedly dumped by her captors. The video had shown the missing mother running toward a highway, Interstate 5, in Yolo County, on the 24th of November, 2016. She had reportedly spent 22 days in captivity. It was initially believed that Papini made a lucky escape after having been kidnapped, but it wouldn't take long for the truth to be figured out. While she was running on the side of the highway, a truck driver who had been traveling northbound spotted her and pulled over before he contacted 911. Emergency officers would arrive on the scene shortly afterward to find the 34-year-old emaciated and distressed. She appeared to be wounded in some areas and reportedly had hose clamps on her ankles. She would then be transported to Woodland Memorial Hospital, where detectives took DNA samples and photographs of the injuries that Papini had sustained. There had also been an alleged branding on her body that was believed to have been a message, but no one was able to decipher it. It would later be announced at a conference that a male's DNA had been discovered, but was not a match to Papini's own husband, nor was it from anyone else in the police database. She would tell the officers that she had been kidnapped by 2 Hispanic women, who spoke mostly Spanish, one of whom was older than the other. Sketches of the alleged suspects would not be released until later on, as Papini struggled to provide enough of a detailed description to the sketch artist. Once the sketches had been finalized, investigators reviewed them and compared the images with known witnesses, but no matches had been made. Sergeant Jackson revealed that Papini only had contact with these 2 individuals during her time of captivity. The 2 sketches were released to the public, along with a reward of up to $10,000. The first woman was described as being between the ages of 20 and 30 years old, and a height of 5 feet 5 inches. She was said to have had a medium build, coarse hair, and pierced ears. Keith Papini, the husband of Sherry Papini, released a statement regarding the new details that were released by the Shasta County Sheriff's Office. He expressed gratitude to all the people who had supported the family during the difficult times. Early on in the investigation, detectives had disclosed that in the lead up to Papini's disappearance, she'd been texting with a man from Michigan. They had allegedly planned to meet when she was due to make a business trip to California. The detective had flown to Michigan but soon ruled him out as a suspect. This trip was made while Papini was still missing. It didn't take long for detectives to start seeing some inconsistencies in the story, but the officers expressed that these inconsistencies should not be taken as a sign of fabrication as of yet. Among these details, there had been one claim where Papini had gotten into a fight with one of her attackers and sustained an injury, but no such injury was found on her person. Sergeant Jackson explained that it's normal for there to be inconsistencies after there had been prolonged trauma. Papini's hair had been cut to shoulder length as well, and she told detectives that before she was released, she heard the kidnappers arguing, followed by the sound of a firearm. Thereafter, the younger attacker took Papini out of the room before dropping her off on the side of the road. Sergeant Jackson would explain that this is something that they had followed up on between them and Yolo County. It was not confirmed if there was any missing people or any homicides in the area. When Keith had contacted 911 after finding his wife was missing, he stated that he was due to meet her at home for lunch, as stated in previous text messages. He told the dispatcher that he made use of a locator app, but found that her mobile devices and headphones were discarded on a dirt trail nearby. Through some extensive DNA testing, Papini would soon be exposed. The aforementioned male DNA had belonged to her ex-partner. It was found that the California mother had indeed faked her own abduction. She was later sentenced to 1.5 years in prison. She pleaded guilty to mail fraud and false statements. She was additionally ordered to pay a $310,000 fine in restitution. Papini went on to admit to falsifying her own kidnapping and was ready to accept the punishment that awaited her. She left the public in fear of these Hispanic captors, who were said to remain at large, but they'd never existed at all. It was further discovered that the ex-partner had assisted Papini in running away. This was corroborated by various telephone records, work schedules, car rental receipts, as well as an interview with his cousin. Papini has also never given further explanation of her behavior, which had additionally included carefully planning her disappearance for months. Her actions had further stumped mental health experts, who were unable to confirm her actions with any diagnosis. Los Angeles authorities were in the process of investigating a possible kidnapping after camera footage on a Ring doorbell camera surfaced. It had recorded the moment a woman had desperately called for help just moments before she was sped off in a car. This ordeal was captured outside of a Leimert Park home in Los Angeles, California, around 11:20 that evening in November of 2019. In the footage, a woman can be seen exiting her house. She's the resident of the home that has the Ring camera. In the video, one can hear a woman scream, "Help me, somebody help me," in the background. An unidentified male can also be heard at the same time profusely apologizing to her. The resident continues to watch in horror from her balcony before a white car speeds down the road with its trunk open. Witnesses had described a woman with dark hair that was braided who'd been sitting in the front seat of the vehicle, and the suspect had been on the driver's side. The car in question is believed to have been a four-door white Prius, with only 2 individuals inside. A longer video clip has also been released that had shown both the male and female homeowners trying to figure out what had just happened. As both of the residents stood in shock, a man had said he took her in a car, while the other remained speechless, while the distant screams could still be heard as they grew fainter. CBS Los Angeles had also spoken with a bystander who described the ordeal as scary. It was as though the man was attacking her and trying to get her, as she was trying to get out of the car, but he wouldn't let her do so. It was also noted that the victim and suspect could be heard arguing moments before the screams. After the ordeal, the Los Angeles Police Department then went door to door in hopes of finding the footage as well as some information. They were unable to locate any further evidence that a kidnapping had taken place, but after seeing the video, the department reopened the case. They would then appeal to the public for any information regarding this incident, asking them to contact 1-877-LAPD-247. The department would soon receive dozens of tips, but none of them had led to identifying the woman who was screaming for help. There are said to have been some individuals who are missing in the area, but none of them have been linked to this case, while the investigators continued to search through various missing people reports. While surveillance footage had captured what was believed to be a Toyota Prius, it's now believed it may actually be a 2003 to 2008 Toyota Matrix. In a statement, the police expressed that witnesses who were on the 3800 block of 3rd Avenue had heard a woman screaming for help. They had also observed a 4-door vehicle that was white in color and occupied by 2 individuals. The statement also detailed that the victim had dark braided hair. Additionally, one of the witnesses reported seeing plastic wrap over the front passenger window that was possibly due to a prior traffic collision. The authorities are uncertain as to whether or not the ordeal had been a kidnapping, a domestic dispute, or something else that had not been identified to be a hoax. It was further reported that some of the witnesses had jumped into their cars to give chase to the vehicle, but it had sped off far too quickly and was not seen again. A surveillance image was later released of the vehicle in question, but no further clues have come about. None of the leads had led to the identification of the woman or the suspect. After weeks of silence from the police department, the community grew concerned. One resident, Clarence Leroy White, explained that he himself had daughters and that this ordeal had certainly concerned him. He expressed that the situation was rather shocking. Another witness, Denise Bingham, had stated that she was bothered by this, and she was rarely bothered by these things. She expressed feeling shaken up just by speaking of it. She further addressed that she couldn't forget the screams of the supposed victim. In order to contact the LAPD Southwest Division to provide the detectives with any further information, You should contact the number 213-485-2197. After hours or on weekends, calls should be directed to the aforementioned contact of 1-877-LAPD 24/7. Anonymous tips can also be sent through Crime Stoppers at 800-222-TIPS or lacrimestoppers.org. A rather strange robbery was captured on a surveillance camera in Georgetown, Kentucky. The robbery had been the theft of the beloved Frish's Big Boy statue. The Frish's hamburgers and fries had not been the same since the Big Boy disappeared. Linda Allen explained that the following morning, she came in and thought that something was missing. When she looked around, everyone there had been questioning where the Big Boy was. The restaurant has since been working with the authorities in order to bring the beloved statue home. The statue is characterized as standing 6 feet tall, having good hair, being robust around the waist, and wearing red and white checkered overalls with shiny black shoes as described by Lieutenant Jason Bruner, after a similar case occurred in Louisville. It's believed that the theft occurred sometime in the early morning, but they're still in search of the person who made off with the 230-pound Big Boy. In the video, one can see as a car pulls up outside the restaurant. It appears that the offenders had exited the vehicle and ran swiftly up to the statue. The two individuals were then able to maneuver it and load it up into a U-Haul vehicle. Investigators have been checking nearby security cameras, as well as speaking with anyone who may have seen what happened. Bruner stated that the team had even made use of the flock camera system around town in an attempt to locate the large statue riding in the back of someone's car or truck, but there have been no leads so far. Customers of the restaurant can only hope that there's a break in the case sometime soon. The Georgetown police are requesting that should anyone have any information regarding this case, that they contact the department or make an anonymous tip through TIP 411. While the video may not be very clear, the Georgetown Police Department is hoping that it jogs someone's memory. Perhaps someone had seen a U-Haul vehicle loading up the beloved statue in the early hours of a Monday morning. Lieutenant Michael Scott expressed that they're looking for the assistance of the community. If there are any tips or leads, the department may certainly be able to bring the Big Boy back. They're also comparing the notes from the Georgetown Big Boy theft to the notes of the Louisville Metro Police after a Big Boy was stolen on Popular Level Road. It was found that over the past few years, these restaurant statues have been a target of the occasional theft around the area. The case in Georgetown and the one in Louisville would make 2 Big Boy thefts in Kentucky within a short time of one another. The Louisville restaurant manager had explained that this was not the first time that the statue had been stolen. It's thought that perhaps the thieves of these 2 statues may be the same. A newspaper report from 2007 had even made mention of one of these statues mysteriously appearing on the roof of a school in Ohio. In 2007, the Big Boy statue had reportedly not been mistreated before high schoolers placed him on the roof of Gahanna Lincoln High School. The statue had been taken from his base of Frish's restaurant in Gahanna. It was placed in bubble wrap before being hidden underneath a tarp, as alleged by Dan Baker, a student from the high school who also worked at the restaurant. It was 5 male students who used a rope to haul the Big Boy up a ladder, 20 feet high onto the roof of the school. Baker had heard these details from an employee as well as other students. Authorities had the names of the 3 students, and 2 of them had given statements. The boys, however, will evade prosecution due to their age. The Gahanna Jefferson School officials have reportedly not settled any disciplinary measures for the students, as stated by the district spokeswoman Mary Otting. The vice president of the marketing sections for Frish's, Karen Meyer, had expressed that the company will be seeking restitution to cover the costs of a makeover for the statue. The restaurant chain was implored to not punish the thieves because no harm was done, and the authorities were confident that they would get to the bottom of it. The general counselor for the Ohio School Boards Association, Rick Dickinson, had said that while he had hoped that there was room for good-natured jokes, there would always be a concern for the damaging of property. CCTV footage of a Christchurch vape shop captured the moment of a terrifying ram raid that would lead to a great financial loss. The video shows a vehicle reportedly ramming into the roll-down security gate before 12 individuals described as youths entered the shop that Saturday evening. The Vapeology store is situated in Shirley, where $15,000 worth of products had been stolen. The store's operations manager, Shea Anaru, had been called to the store the following morning by security. Once Anaru arrived there, it was discovered that vape products had littered the ground with more debris littering the store outside. Images of the aftermath showed that the doors to the shop had been smashed and buckled, with the security gate misshapen due to the repeated impacts. This had been the first time that the store had been raided. While the authorities proceeded to evaluate the scene outside, Anaru took a look at the CCTV camera from inside. What he drew would absolutely shock him. He went on to tell the New Zealand Herald that it had been hard to watch the footage and that was the only way he could describe it. Usually when ram raids occurred, there would be around 3 to 4 individuals assisting, but the amount that was seen storming the vape shop had been rather alarming. It was expressed that some of the officers, as well as Anaru, had never seen so many people involved in a ram raid before. The footage had to be reviewed from multiple angles and was certainly not easy to watch. The investigating authorities had confirmed that various offenders had entered the shop around 3:30 on Saturday. They had used a stolen car, which was found abandoned at the shop after the youths had left the scene. It's said that the police are making some follow-up inquiries. The Christchurch Department is said to be reviewing the footage, and they're trying to identify as well as locate the perpetrators, but it's not been confirmed as to whether or not they've captured all of them. In their statement, the officers did not confirm any arrests in relation to the ram raid, but Anaru believed that the officers had said that the offenders had been too young to even be charged. It's believed that some of the assailants had been identified, but their names were not released, nor could they be charged with the crime. There would be no consequences for these individuals, and when asked how he felt about this, Anaru admitted that he wasn't pleased. He further stated that a law change would be rather helpful given the amount of ram raids that occur in Christchurch. It's not known what the cost would be in order to repair the store, including the smashed entrance and the furniture that was damaged during the raid. Quotes were yet to come in regarding the cost of reparations. The following day, the cleanup had begun, and the business had remained closed until everything was restored. Anaru had stated that the biggest loss was not even the ram raid, but rather the time that the store had to be closed, which would cause them to miss out on trading revenue. This revenue would pay his 6 members of staff as well as himself. It was not being able to have the staff working there and cutting their hours that really saddened the owner as well. The last high-profile ram raid in the area had occurred a year prior in another shop. The offenders had smashed through the entrance despite having strong security measures in place. It had been a security store that was raided, and ammunition was found strewn across the shop. An air rifle as well as a paintball gun had been stolen. Another Christchurch vape store had also been the victim of another raid, but this time in Addington. It had been hit only 1 month after it had opened. The store would close for a week while the business worked on a cleanup. Multiple Christchurch shops are being hit by overnight ram raids. While the suspects in the case of Anaru's shop had been mostly identified, some remain unknown, and even if they are found, they'll likely face no repercussions. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.